My entitled employer decided to screw me over right when I showed up for the job, as he tried to undercut my pay at the last second after I drove 9 hours to make the job. So I decided to get some much needed revenge by literally playing his game against him, forcing him to pay me even more money just to shut him down and show him that he cannot screw with me in this kind of way. Here's how it all went down. I want to start off by saying that I'm a paramedic, and please don't be fooled. We don't do cool stuff every day. It's a regular job with moments of sheer terror, stress, and tons of other things to do, but only at certain random times. After years of working the regular ambulance, I needed to go work where things were less stressful. Thankfully, a lot of industrial projects needed paramedics, and the exchange is fair but brutal. I avoided the stress in exchange for staggering periods of crushing boredom. Nobody wants me to be busy on an oil well completion. I'm there just in case crap goes down and to secure lower insurance rates. There are also way more different private companies that fill contracts to provide medical staff for industry than you might believe. So if work dries up at one company, I'm going to find the company that has work and sign up with them. And all the companies understand this. It's only casual class work, even if you do 84 hours a week, 3 weeks a month. Mercenaries go where money is, and I do the exact same thing. The quality of the company varies, and some companies give you good quality gear, and others give you crap that looks like it was made by Fisher-Price but less durable. Now the pay is around the same, and paramedics aren't available in huge abundance. Now I don't know about any other industry, but we are an employee market right now, and for some weird reason, the average time people like being paramedics is 10 years. Whatever a company is paying its staff who's brand new and just out of school, I won't be working for them without being paid more than that. And sure, I may be an old man, but my experience has value. So I was contracted online by a company about a 24-day contract with possible work after that. My first question is always about the pay. The general manager seemed personable and charismatic on the phone, and he asked me what I've been making on average. So I told him that $34 an hour is the middle ground, and he replied by saying, "Okay, great. We can be competitive with that wage." And I thought to myself, well, crap. I don't know why I didn't press him on an exact number and how I missed the weasel word competitive. I am normally way too suspicious and cynical to not get specifics or miss a huge red flag like that. I don't know where this sudden faith in the good intentions of strangers came from because it's never been there before. Now, I agreed to start heading in my own car to their office the next day, as it was about a 9-hour drive away. And if you think that's a dumb thing to do without getting anything in writing, well, maybe, but it's just how it works out being a paramedic on industrial jobs. Nobody's ever tried to screw me over before, and it always goes the same. They ask me when I can start, and then they tell me to drive to this town and get my equipment and do paperwork to become an employee and get to the job. And the pay has always been what was agreed to, both verbally and in writing. Now, I arrived at this janky yard with an office trailer, and I met with the general manager. He then started talking about the oil well job, which is a large project, and it's why they need my level of care. So I thought to myself, okay, so there's a large chance of no incidents, and a small chance that something will explode and probably take us all out. We then toured the office and equipment before we went to his office to then move forward and complete the onboarding paperwork. He then said to me, "As soon as you sign the employment agreement, we can get you on the road. The job is set up to begin tomorrow." Now, I agreed that I could get on the road as soon as we fixed the error of my hourly rate, because they had it marked down that I was going to get paid $26 an hour when we had agreed on $34 an hour. And when I asked him about this, he said that he confirmed that this was the rate they wanted to pay me for the 24-day job. I then let the general manager know that I didn't like the deceptiveness or driving 800 kilometers for the experience. I didn't share his thoughts on the meaning of certain words. The general manager then said, "I hope you don't hold me responsible for the mismatch with our communication and your expectations," because apparently he was 100% convinced that I would agree to that wage before I would go home empty-handed. He even said to me, "Oh, you're here anyways, just this one time," and stuff like that came up over and over again. I already see myself in the future burning this man in effigy. I'll be holding hands and singing Kumbaya with his family at the same time. He clearly thinks he's the smartest person in the room everywhere he goes. I mean, I can't see any evidence that he's aware how transparent his bullcrap is. Like, he's definitely not in any danger of being appointed to the Royal Society by mistake. If I was risking homelessness, I would have done it. It's harder to exploit people if they don't risk immediate economic ruin. I mean, I have savings. During that time in history and during that season of the year, it actually wouldn't have been unreasonable to get a different job the same week or even in the same day, because getting too many job offers was the real problem. I let the guy know that I wasn't interested in the job at that wage. And trust me, you would be very wrong in thinking he would let that be the end of it. He kept showing me how much contempt he had for me as a person. He said to me, "We could come up in wages, but it might mean that some bills don't get paid on time. We could go to $30 an hour. What do you say about that?" And I said to him, "Well, you're about $4 an hour away from being at the solution." He then started talking about how it's tough being a small company that nobody helps. "We have to bid low on jobs to get them. We can't survive if we don't, and that means that we can't pay the most. We can't compete without doing that. Maybe you just don't understand capitalism or running a business. He then gave vague, non-specific statements and pledges of future benefits occurred. He was basically saying, oh, we help people who help us. Or he'll say, oh, we remember our friends and loyalty, and eventually we pay our dividends. Now, I don't know about others, but I hate when an employer makes statements about them being more like family. I mean, maybe your family, but nobody in my family tries to screw me over, and they don't financially mistreat other relatives. I work for money. I'm a professional. I hold a professional license, and you pay me for my professional skills. If the quality you're looking for above all else is loyalty, then hire a golden retriever. Now, all of this manipulative nonsense might have worked on me when I was a bit younger, and I viewed life with a rosier shade. But I'm not special. Most veteran paramedics wouldn't react much differently. I told him that I was leaving, and then I got in my car and I said, burn my resume. Good luck in your quest to find someone desperate enough to debase themselves. Well, I got about 20 minutes down the highway before I took a call from the general manager, and I thought to myself, oh, screw it, why not? Let's go ahead and answer it. I'm actually curious why he wants to talk to me. In that time frame, he had called their customer, the billion-dollar oil company, and told them that they had no paramedic for the next day. Well, that sucks because as this guy explained it to me, they couldn't legally do any work if one wasn't on site. And these oil barons must have said some ugly and menacing words to him because when we talked, he was tripping over himself to get me to come back for this job. He kept saying that $34 an hour is fine, he'll pay for it. I'm a special boy and they're spoiling me with my allowance. He tried hard to be personable and act like my long-term bestie. Joked about the owner not being able to lease a new Mercedes until next year. Laughs and chuckles because, you know, who cares, right? At least they won't be stuck paying for all the cost of putting an entire site on standby. Now, at this point, I fought the impulse to engage in comical levels of extortion. Everyone really should admire my restraint because I really wanted to tell him, hey, I'll do it for $250,000 a day. But instead, I chose an extra $6 above my initial wage. I arrived there being willing to cut a small company some slack on my regular $34 an hour, and not even an hour after dealing with their manager, I felt justified in any outrageous demand. When I told the general manager that I'd be happy to drive back for this job, he made an audible noise of relief. His bacon must have been truly torched without me returning. But that moment of relief soured when I told him I wasn't going to do it without being paid $40 an hour. Well, that guy didn't take it with grace. What are you talking about? That's not the wage you told me you normally make. You can't do that. And you know what? He's right. That's the top dollar I made for a short notice, must be done kind of job. He's very wrong if he thinks I can't be a huge jerk when negotiating my wage. I mean, laws aren't written to enforce politeness. I confirmed that this was a recent price change, and I stated, well, I hope you don't hold me responsible for this sudden increase in labor cost. I don't control the invisible hand of economics. Market forces dictate wages. Right now, there's an urgent need for skilled people and a shortage of an available workforce. Well, when I said that, he agreed to my offer, and I'm not ignorant about his lack of options. I got an explicit wage offer in multiple pieces of writing, and I wasn't surprised to learn that he is not a gracious loser. The snide remarks just kept coming in. Shutting him up was a Herculean task not worth my effort. He told me that I might be damaging myself long term, as this could harm my reputation and lose my future employment. And it's like, what are you talking about? Damaging my reputation for being a competent paramedic who also behaves like a jerk with regularity? God forbid the EMS community discovers my abrasive nature and lack of decorum. Please don't inform everyone how I don't feel the need to use a language filter in every single situation. You can't alienate me from anything, bro. I've beaten you to that eons ago. Well, thankfully, my paycheck was what I was expecting it to be, without anything going wrong or getting mixed up. And to be completely honest, I wasn't actually convinced that's how it would all play out. The job was fine, nothing worth remembering, and I only did the 24-day job. I didn't ask about more work, and they definitely did not offer. Because at the end of the day, it's important to not underestimate your own value, especially when it comes to people who are actively trying to screw you over. Oh my gosh, this guy's a piece of crap who did this to you. Seriously, you agree to $34 an hour on the phone, and then you show up and this guy's like, oh, whoops, looks like it's gonna be less. You're gonna take the job, right? Oh yeah, it starts tomorrow, by the way. Like, dude, you drove over 800 kilometers. You drove 9 hours to get there. And I don't know about you, but if I drove that far just to get the rug pulled out from underneath me, I would be pissed. I would be so upset, like seriously. So good for you for setting this guy straight and playing his game against him, because his behavior was completely unacceptable. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not letting my roommate borrow my laptop for her online exam after she literally broke her own? Because right now she's saying that I'm being controlling for not just handing it over, and at this point I feel like a bad friend and I'm honestly not sure if I'm in the wrong. Here's what's going on. I'm a 23-year-old female college student living with my roommate, who we will call Emma, in a shared apartment. I'm super careful with my stuff, especially my laptop, laptop, which I saved up for last year to use for school and side gigs. Now, Emma is generally pretty cool, but she's not great with her electronics. She has cracked her phone screen twice and recently dropped her laptop, which stopped working entirely. Well, last week Emma told me that she has an important online exam coming up, and she asked to borrow my laptop for it since hers is broken. Now, I was hesitant because I've got my own assignments due, and I use my laptop to freelance graphic design work, which is time sensitive. Plus, I'm paranoid about something happening to it given her track record. I offered to let her use it at our kitchen table while I'm home, just so I could keep an eye on it, and I even suggested that she try to use the library's computers as a backup. But when I said that, she got upset with me, saying the library's computers are slow and she needs a reliable device for her timed exam. She then called me controlling for not just handing it over, and said I'm not being a good friend, especially since she's let me borrow small things like her hairdryer before. I feel bad because I know she's stressed about her exam, and I really just don't want to seem stingy, but I worked hard for my laptop, and I need it for my own work and my own classes. I also don't think it's fair that she expects me to risk my device when she hasn't been careful with hers. I suggested she ask another friend or rent a laptop herself, but she said I'm making it harder for her, and then she stormed off. So am I the jerk for not letting her borrow my laptop outright? Because right now I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, no, you are not the jerk. You're not obligated to give her your laptop just because you're roommates. And the fact that she's trying to be like, oh, you should just give it to me. You're being so controlling right now. I can't stand this. Like, that's just straight up manipulation. This is your property. You don't have to give it to her. And you know what? If she really needs to take that exam, she can use the library computer. Like, who cares if it's slow? Go ahead and use that if you really need something. Because there's a high likelihood that your laptop is going to get broken too, because she's busted her phone screen twice and dropped her own laptop and it's not even working anymore. So no, you're not the jerk for not giving it to her. She's clearly not to be trusted, and honestly, I would not even entertain that for another second. Am I the jerk for ghosting someone after they basically started to copy my entire personality? Because after dealing with this for so long, I'm honestly at my breaking point and I just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I met this girl at my college language learning center, and at first she seemed super chatty, like very chatty, but I just assumed that she might be neurospicy, so I didn't think much of it and I just vibed pretty well with her. But it honestly started getting really weird. Like, I would say stuff like, well, I'm gonna go run to the bathroom real quick, 1 second. And she'd say, okay, I'll come with you. Or I would say, I need to go skate alone for a bit to clear my head. And then she would just insist on coming along every single time, even though she doesn't even skate or have a board in the first place. Even if I said I just needed a minute, if I went to go get snacks for my friends, she would have to come along too. One time, I needed to talk about something serious with my friend, and she literally followed us out. And even when I told her that she needed to leave, she proceeded to say, oh, I just want to hear what's going on. And it's like, dude, are you kidding me? She also kept bringing me food, which was honestly super sweet. And let's be real, as a broke college student living on not that much money, that is a big deal for people you just met. But with that in mind, she also kept saying she didn't have money and lived out of state. So it just made me and a lot of my friends feel worried and guilty. When I first met her, I gave her my TikTok so that we could send each other videos. But I never have notifications on because I don't want to get hooked. When I checked like 3 days later, she had sent me over 150 videos. And every time I saw her, she would ask me again and again if I'd watched all of them, pointing out specific ones and making me open my phone to watch them right then and there. But I then noticed slowly but surely, she started talking like me, using my little phrases, mimicking my laugh, even going as far as copying my accent. Now, for the record, I don't even really have one, but I'm from a place where certain words sound different. And then on top of all of that, she started dressing exactly like me. Jean jackets, the same shoes, the same leggings, even down to the specific brands. Now I wear a headscarf, but I'm not super strict on the way I dress, but I make sure no skin is showing as we live in a desert, so it's really hot. So when she started dressing the exact same and complained about the heat, it finally got to me. It even got to music. She's from the South and said that she was a country fan, but after I brought up my taste, she suddenly would blast it on her headphones around her neck or post it on her story. After a few months of that, this incident really pushed me to cut her off. I let her try my board one day and offered to help her learn, and she was like, no, I got it, and then fell every single time. She couldn't even balance, and even ignored my advice. And I don't really think much of it until she calls me that night, literally panicking and having an anxiety attack. She said to me, I need to get the same skateboard as you. And the next day she shows up with the exact same one, like down to the design and the logo. She did it right at once, but also she put it next to mine and kept trying to get me to look at it and adjust it with my tools. And that was honestly my breaking point, because after that, I just kind of started distancing myself. I stopped letting her follow me everywhere, I stopped accepting her food, and eventually stopped being super friendly. When she brought us crumble cookies and I politely said no thank you, she straight up got mad and was like, I bought these for you. Why are you ignoring me? And it was the first time I saw her genuinely aggressive, and it really freaked me out. She eventually stopped coming around and I didn't even notice it at first, but I haven't seen her on on campus either. I never explained why I pulled away, I just did. And I feel like maybe I should have said something. Maybe she was just lonely or didn't realize how much she was crossing boundaries. But also, I felt like my every move was being followed by someone who wanted to become me. So seriously, am I the jerk here? Because right now I'm not sure what to do. Okay, honestly, I don't think you're the jerk at all because this is some weird behavior. She only wanted to be around you because she wanted to copy you and become exactly like you. And that is super weird in my opinion. I can understand why you would get frustrated because I know I would absolutely get frustrated with that as well, especially with her literally just crossing boundaries left and right. So no, you're not the jerk and you're definitely not obligated to entertain whatever the crap was going on with her because her behavior was incredibly weird. Am I the jerk for refusing to take sides in a workplace feud after my coworkers have lost their mind accusing a coworker of stealing from the rest of them? Because right now this is all so petty and stupid, I honestly just want nothing to do with it. Here's what's going on. I'm a 39-year-old female and I've been an ER doctor in a small rural hospital for 6 years now. One of the ugly secrets not everyone knows about hospitals is that valuables often go missing. It's deplorable, but in a place with hundreds of workers and thousands of strangers constantly coming in and out, likely not everyone is gonna be honest. So since my first day here, my coworkers told me to hide my wallet because cash tends to disappear around here. But what kept changing was the alleged culprit. In my first year, everybody swore it was a health technician who eventually quit for unrelated reasons. Then they switched to blame an ER nurse and now to another for the past 2 to 3 years. Now I believe that where there's smoke, there's also fire. And that being said, my own experience in these years has always been very positive. I'm known to be very forgetful and careless about my stuff, yet nothing has ever disappeared. As long as I've been here, I've always refused to take sides. I'm friendly with everyone, and although I enjoy innocent gossip, like who's sleeping with who, I firmly refuse to judge anyone based on voices alone. Now, a woman we will call Amy, who is the person everyone's blaming for this, has always been a friend of mine. We exchange jokes, and sometimes we speak in confidence. She's in a rough spot because of health concerns with her elderly parents, and I try to be as supportive as possible. But what really drives me up a wall is the general attitude in the ward. At least 3 ER workers have told me that they have personally witnessed Amy rummaging through coworkers and patients' purses, yet no one has ever stopped her in the act, or even called her to the side to ask what in the world she was doing or filed a report. Lately, I've been unwillingly involved in this drama, although I always just try to stay out of it. A couple of colleagues have openly criticized me for continuing to be in good terms with Amy, implying that if I keep being friends with her, then I must condone her behavior. But yesterday, I finally lost my cool. I bluntly stated that I have the right to talk to whoever I want, that I've never actually seen a sliver of proof that she's actually done what she's accused of, that adult people should have the courage to speak up when they see someone committing a crime, and that this mean girl's attitude is more worthy of kindergarten than any kind of professional setting. As so, I'm now shunned by a good portion of my coworkers. Now, I couldn't care less about what my coworkers think, but I'm torn about how I handled the situation. If Amy is actually guilty, of course I won't shield her anymore, but I don't feel comfortable jumping on the bandwagon with nothing more than whispers and gossip. So am I the jerk for refusing to take sides in this workplace feud? Because right now I'm honestly incredibly frustrated. Okay, honestly, no, I don't think you're the jerk at all. Because these people literally go from one person to the next just blaming anybody in their path. And you hit the nail on the head. If they really had witnessed Amy like stealing or rifling through other people's crap, then they should have said something. But instead they sat by idly and just said, oh, I'm just gonna talk about it instead of doing something about it. And also I love the fact that you're like, look, I can talk to whoever I want. I'm not getting involved in this stupid drama and you can't make me. Because truthfully, that's the way it should be. You should not be forced to get into this stupid, idiotic drama in the slightest. So no, you're not the jerk here, because there's no way I would ever take sides, as this seems incredibly stupid to argue over. Am I the jerk for not spending time with my sister, even though my mom and sister both say that I'm the problem, despite the fact that I haven't done anything? Because right now I'm honestly feeling very frustrated and I just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. To start things out, I'm 19 years old and I have a twin sister, and we've always gotten along about as well as siblings do. We would fight, make up, and sometimes need our parents to step in, but we were close growing up. The last few years though, she's gotten into serious trouble. When we were 16 years old, she started sneaking out with a 20-year-old guy and his friends. Even though I had nothing to do with it, I got in trouble too. And that happened more than once. Every time she did something wrong, I somehow got pulled into it, and I ended up getting punished as well. Eventually, I told her to stop telling me what she was doing because I didn't want to be involved anymore. Around Christmas that year, one of her friends called my mom and said that my sister had been drinking every night and was really depressed. Not long after that, my parents found out that she had slept with a bunch of people. Things blew up at home after that, and it felt like we were always dealing with some kind of crisis. Now, to be fair, nothing major has happened in the last 6 months. She seems more stable, but now my mom takes her side in everything. No matter what, I'm always the one being told that I'm doing something wrong. Things got worse after she broke up with her long-term boyfriend, who who I will call Jay for the sake of the story. She spiraled after that. We found out later that he had been mistreating her, so I get why she was struggling, but she also started lashing out at me a lot more. When they were together, I was always respectful of her time. She would stay over at his house for days, and I never said anything about it. I understood that she loved him and wanted to be with him. Right before they broke up, I started dating my current boyfriend, and at first she was fine with it, but once she was single, she started yelling at me for spending time with him. She tells me I'm selfish and that I never want to be around her anymore. Now, I see my boyfriend about twice a week, sometimes more and sometimes less. I know I've spent less time with her, but I also feel like she's made it unbearable to be around her. She's always sad or angry, and she takes everything out on me. She acts like I'm her only friend in the world, and I just don't want that role. I know if she had a boyfriend right now, this wouldn't even be an issue. She also has a habit of getting involved in big friend groups, and then somehow they fall apart. She will get close with people, and then drama starts and things explode. Even my mom has admitted this happens. So it's not just me who feels like she can be toxic and emotionally draining. Despite all of this, both my mom and my sister are saying that I'm the one being selfish. They say that I'm a bad sister for pulling away, and that I should be there for her. But I've spent years trying to support her, and I honestly just feel burnt out. I love her, but I don't like being around her anymore. So am I the jerk for wanting space and not hanging around her as often? Because right now I seriously don't know what to do. No, you're not the jerk at all. When it comes to family, if they're mistreating you, then guess what? It's time to pull back and try and do something else. You do not have to put up with that for a second. Their disrespect is not justifiable because you have not done anything wrong. So no, you're not the jerk. This is just you setting up healthy boundaries. And if they can't respect that, then that is absolutely their problem and not yours.
Dad thinks I'm a sicko for taking photos of his daughter. But it's literally my job? This happened to me a while ago at a volleyball training school that I worked at part-time. My dad co-owns the place with 4 other people, 2 of whom are ex-pro volleyball players from Russia. At the school, we have different colored shirts for the students based on age range: green, blue, white, and black shirt for staff. All of these have a giant logo of the school plastered on the front of it. Since I play soccer and have school to focus on, I only work there part-time. When I do things like update rosters, take payments, translate for people in Spanish, which is my first language, and things of that nature. Now, because I like photography and my pictures are pretty decent, my dad pays me extra than my usual salary to take pictures for their website and to help him with logos and color schemes for game uniforms, which are different from practice uniforms. Photoshop stuff. It's relatively easy. Anyway, I walked in one Thursday afternoon, and after completing some paperwork and finalizing some payments, I went out of the staff room or office to take pictures of the class in action. We teach from grade levels 8 through 12. Today was a class of 8th and 9th graders. I had my uniform on, but because it was a bit chilly inside, I didn't bother taking my jacket off. I thought that as long as I kept it unzipped so people could see the logo on the shirt, it'd be fine. Well, that was a mistake. I set my camera's shutter speed, checked to make sure the flash was off because I didn't want to mess with the students, and started snapping pictures. It was at this point that one girl's father came in to pick up his daughter. I should mention that normally the girl's mother picks her up, so he didn't know the staff very well. There was still about 5 to 10 minutes left of class, so he made his way over to the rows of chairs lining the walls of the gym. That was until he saw me, a punk high schooler, 11th grade at the time, taking pictures of his poor freshman daughter and her classmates that he thought I could use for my own enjoyment in the privacy of my bedroom. He immediately got up from his seat and stormed up to me. He demanded to know what I was doing taking pictures of his daughter and threatened to destroy my camera if I didn't give him the SD card right that second. I was so shocked at the sudden confrontation that I couldn't think of anything to say. So I simply grabbed the side of my jacket and opened it a little so the logo on my shirt became visible. The look on his face when he saw the staff uniform I had on was one of absolute horror and shame. He mumbled a half-assed apology and walked back to the seating area. To clarify some things, the girl's mother is the person who signed her up and who took her to and from practice. The dad either didn't read the terms and conditions of the sign-up contract or didn't care. That mother gave us approval on the form dedicated to photography of the students. Now, every time he walks in, he never speaks to me. Even when the bill for the classes is due to be paid, he either waits until he's sure I'm not around or he gets his wife to do it. He's actually a nice guy from what my dad tells me, he's just ashamed. Yep, sucks to be that guy. I don't know if he's truly a jerk, and you can kind of understand his protective instincts and reaction when he didn't have all the info. But still, I feel like you can at least ask a question before you fly into a dad rage, can't you? And honestly, 11th grade is how old? 17 or 18? Unless you were one of the few teenage boys in the world fortunate enough to not look like a creep at that age, I can guiltily admit that it might have helped him launch into his conclusion. But I'll say I think the fact that he was so darn ashamed afterwards does help paint him in a more positive light though. Regret, and actually at least being able to mumble an apology, hint that he was a better people than most who appear in these stories. If he's anything near as unlucky as I am, maybe he doesn't let out his rage much, and the one time he actually yelled at someone turned out to be a massive understanding. The times where I've done that are always enough to make me shudder thinking about years later. Entitled mother demands that I hire her daughter, then demands that I make her my partner. To preface, I own my own jewelry business. I have a couple of stories that can be added here if there's interest, but I was doing a small local Celtic festival and I was just starting out at the time. This was under my own purple 10x10 pop-up tent with attachable sidewalls, and this minor detail will come into play later. So the show was going and I only have 2 sidewalls up to block the sun. I'm sitting behind the tables in the back working on a custom order for a client. I'm in the corner where the sidewalls meet. Enter the entitled mum and her daughter. Daughter was about 15, I couldn't really tell to be honest. My darling husband starts his typical chat and spiel with the mother, and she tells him she's just looking. She then sees I'm working and starts to move items on the tables so she can lean over this 2-foot wide table that I'm working on. I pop my head up and lift my magnifying goggles and say, excuse me, Mum, please don't rearrange my stock. Well, I can't see what you're doing. I'm working on a client's custom necklace. If you need a hand, my husband will happily assist you. That doesn't look hard to do. You should hire my daughter. She makes paracord bracelets. Oh, well, we're not hiring at the moment, but I'll keep your suggestion in mind. Well, she can do sales. You shouldn't have a male working selling jewelry. At this point, my husband's eyebrows go up, and he rolls them behind her back. The daughter comes up and says, Mom, I want to buy this and this, picking up a couple of pairs of earrings and a necklace. No, sweetie. Wait until you're an employee and then use your employee discount. I had to butt in at this point. I'm sorry, but we're really not hiring at the moment, and that male is my husband and business partner. The entitled mother huffs and grabs her daughter by the arm and starts walking away. I nod to my husband to chase after them to get the product back from the entitled daughter. He comes back and we chuckle over the situation and we thought it was over. Well, we were wrong. So wrong. 1 hour later, the mother comes back. I've been watching from over there and you've sold a lot of jewelry. I can also see a lot of people walking around with your bags. Okay, thank you. So I think I should be your new business partner. You can make everything and I'll sell it and keep half the money. Honestly, my mind went into a blue screen of death mode and my jaw was on the ground. At this point, my husband chimed in. Excuse me, could you repeat that, ma'am? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to her. My brain finally rebooted at that point. I'm sorry, I'm not looking for a partner right now. I already have one. Oh, he doesn't count. He's just your husband. He doesn't do anything. Okay, that's it. I stood up. Mom, I don't need or want a partner, and I'm not looking for an employee. This is a family business. Have a great day. And she stalks off. 10 minutes later, my hubby goes off for a break. Suddenly, I hear a ripping noise as a sidewalk gets ripped off my tent. I stand up ready to defend my cash box. Oh God, it's her. She starts ranting at me in a high-pitched, scratchy voice. Honestly, at this point, I can barely pay attention to her words. She's trying to grab at my tools while saying how she can sell my stuff for me and I need her. I scream for security and my darling husband. I could see him 2 booths away and I turn to her. Get your fricking hands off my stuff now and get the frick out of my booth. Security came, heard me out first and removed her from the festival. I learned later that she tried this on another booth as well. I mean, why wouldn't you want to hire her? I see absolutely no downsides to being partners with someone who behaves like that. Good God, that's a lot of crazy to be putting on display up front when you're looking to find people to work with. I mean, honestly, at least they're probably better off for her flying off the handlebars and having such terrible people skills. She's showing exactly what she'd be like to work with and essentially blaring out a warning for everyone in the vicinity. Most awful people are at least capable of temporarily hiding their insanity right up until it's too late and you're entangled with them in a way that's legally and financially tricky to escape from. I don't know if the lady and her daughter initially walking away was attempted theft or not, but the fact that she did that and then came back to demand they go into business is wild. Topped only by her second return to engage in vandalism whilst still insisting that she'd make a valuable asset to the author. What does this woman mean when she says run the business? Because I sure as heck wouldn't want her in sales or talking to potential venues. Just a complete nutcase, and you dodged many, many bullets by telling her to get lost. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Try to oust my mother from spreading my grandmother's ashes? Okay, I'll steal some. Prepare for a long story. This has taken place over the past year and a half. It's been pretty crappy for my family, to say the least. My grandmother died in November 2016. It was a really hard loss for my family, especially my cousin, who was really close to her. We had a beautiful end-of-life ceremony for her in lieu of a funeral, and she was cremated as well. My aunt kept the urn. Over the years, my aunt has crept from a manageable pain in the butt to a completely self-absorbed, borderline psychotic individual. I could go on and on about the drama she's put my family through, but the important bits for this tale are that she lived closer to my grandmother throughout her life, though my mother, her sister, only lived about an hour away. And so she saw my grandmother more often, and often into adulthood, my grandmother seemed to have a preference for interacting with my mother, because she's just lower maintenance than my aunt. One last thing to mention is that my aunt has kicked my cousin out of the house about 4 times since he's turned 18, not even a year ago. They butt heads frequently. She's an alcoholic and he's, well, 18 and headstrong. After the end-of-life ceremony, my aunt stopped talking much to my mother. She never really mentioned having the urn, and my mother never laid eyes on it, despite it being her mother. A year or so went by until one day my aunt popped up and stated that she was going to spread the ashes at a nearby beach that we all visited throughout our lives. She picked a date without consulting anyone, specifically my mother, and said if we could make it, great, if not, tough luck. Needless to say, everyone was kind of annoyed, but my mother, myself, and my cousin switched our work schedules in order to be there. This was communicated clearly. Fast forward to the week before this event, and my aunt now messages us all stating that she's had an obligation the next day and won't be able to handle the ashes spreading on the date planned. She changed the date to 1 week later, and again, if you couldn't make it, tough luck. My mother and I were irritated and stated that we didn't think we could change our schedules 2 weeks in a row. My mother owns a business, which makes changing dates hard. My aunt went on to say that it was my mother's fault for the date switch due to her schedule, and when called out that she had said that she needed the date changed, abruptly ended the conversation and didn't respond to anything else. My mother and I then spoke at length. She was hurt and angry at her sister for never consulting with her about how to handle a ceremony with the ashes, and even more upset that her own sister wouldn't wait to do this with her. When asked about why this had to be done now, as opposed to waiting until everyone could be there, my aunt stated that my grandmother's brother, who was in poor health, wanted the ashes to be spread ASAP, so he knows it was done, and that he wanted a video of the event for himself. My mother eventually told my aunt she wasn't going and that she just wanted to see the video that my aunt took of the event. She told me and my father that she just couldn't deal with my aunt's drama, and where she was focusing on her own mental health, didn't want to compromise her progress because my aunt just causes her so much distress. This enraged me. I was upset already, but was completely floored by the idea that my aunt would have this ceremony without anyone present but her and her boyfriend. My cousin didn't know if he could make it either, by the way. I was so hurt for my mother, who clearly was just avoiding conflict with her sister and would miss this event that could bring her closure with her own mother. They'd had a hard relationship as she grew up. I was frustrated for myself and my cousin, who would love to have an experience of letting go of my grandmother together as a family as well. So, I made a plan. My cousin was living back at home at the time, and he was also furious with his mother, so I told him, "Hey, I need you to do something really weird, but it's for my mother." And like a trooper, he says, "Anything for you guys." And that's how the Ashes heist began. My cousin didn't hesitate. One afternoon, while my aunt was at work, my cousin broke into the urn and stole about half a cup of my grandmother, double-bagged it, and promptly hid it in a container of hair pomade, like a grandma's stash. Later that night, in the dark and pouring rain, we met in an abandoned parking lot where he passed me the goods. He said he stole himself some of my grandmother too. We felt vindicated. We hugged and parted ways. 2 weeks later, I gave my mother the ashes in a tiny keepsake urn while visiting her for my birthday. She cried, we hugged, and I could see the anxiety about the whole thing wash off her, because she's now in control of her own goodbye ceremony, independent from my aunt, who has no idea what happened. This past Sunday, my aunt spread the ashes at the beach as planned. She didn't take a video. She still hasn't responded to my mother, who asked for the video the day of. My aunt later messaged her and told her there was no video. They, quote, got to the beach late and didn't tape because there was no privacy. She went to a public beach, and she'd had her boyfriend bury my grandmother's ashes in the sand, which makes my blood boil truly. I'm not sure what happened to the "her brother needs a video" excuse. My cousin says the urn is empty at home, as no one has heard from my aunt at all afterwards. I can imagine myself being so much more furious if I hadn't bested her. I imagine my mother would be quietly devastated and never being able to do anything about it. My aunt lives in a world where she planned this event with no regard for anyone else and lied about making a video of it for the family. A video that would have been our only connection to that moment. A moment she robbed my mother, my cousin, and myself of. But she has no idea what my cousin and I have done and how we had to plan in advance for her debaggery in order to ensure that we were spared her selfishness. I can't wait to tell her. I wouldn't have switched the entirety of my grandmother's ashes with some other powdered substance for 2 reasons. The biggest being that would completely out my cousin as my accomplice and put him at risk of losing a place to live in his last weeks of high school, pre-college. I'm not going to jeopardize my cousin's life in any way, and while she may not have been able to tell the difference between fire pit ashes and people ashes, the risk was there. Second, and also important, is that taking all of the ashes in turn robs my aunt of her ceremony for her mother as well, whether she'd know it or not. I'm hugely upset with her actions and ending a relationship with her. However, the point of me doing this was because she took the choice away from my mother. I'd feel awful for doing the same to my aunt, despite her actions. I may not be beyond stealing some of the ashes, but I wouldn't be able to justify that level of just revenge. I think the real revenge here is that I bested her by stealing some of the ashes and that she's literally losing her entire family due to her selfishness. Oh, and I know a lot of you are asking for an update when she finds out. I'm not sure when that will happen, as my cousin's housing security is the top priority at this point. Until then, all 3 of us, myself, my mother, and my cousin, all have ashes from the urn. My cousin gave me a lot. Half a cup is a lot of ashes for those small keepsake urns, so I brought myself a little urn as well. My cousin wants to take hers to Italy to spread in the homeland. I'm not sure where I'm at yet, or what my mother is planning. So, am I the jerk for stealing a good portion of my grandmother's final earthly remains? If anyone else in the comments can suggest a better way to deal with this than what happened in the story, the narrator would honestly like to hear it. Obviously, there's a great deal of subterfuge and going behind people's backs in this, but honestly, it doesn't feel like there was any more conflict-free way for the mother here to also get some closure and a final goodbye to her mother, without also kicking up a massive fuss. I'd also like to commend the author from refraining on stealing the whole darn thing out of genuine concern for her aunt's well-being, despite how nasty and selfish that woman was being about it. I did search their profile to see if there was an update and ending to it, but alas, no dice. It may well be that they realized that everyone was just happier with the deception and it would do the most to keep the peace. As much as I enjoy a good meltdown, these are real people with real feelings, so it might have been better for her to take the moral high ground. Karen on a plane. I was on an airplane and right when we landed, a Karen in the back unbuckled and darted to the front of the plane to get off first. She didn't make eye contact and felt that she was special. I'm talking about going from the very last seat on the plane, down the whole row and past first class, basically standing at the little kitchen thing in the front. All this time, the seatbelt sign was still on and we were still rolling down the runway. The flight crew had asked for her to return to her seat until we reached the gate, but she wasn't even responding. Everyone was basically just trying to wait it out. It had been a long flight, 8 hours, and at this point we were exhausted anyways. No one said a word. Suddenly, the captain announced that we had a special guest on board and he'd be coming out to greet after we were settled at the gate. The Karen stood there awkwardly until we did the whole rolling into the gate and whatever planes do when they land for about 15 to 20 minutes. Everyone sat there waiting to see what the captain was talking about. Eventually, the captain came out and asked the lady to please move back a little to try and get to his special guest. Then a little more. Then a little more. He was looking from row to row trying to find a specific person. Everyone was watching and looking to see who it could be. He kept going and going, asking the Karen to please step back a few more steps each time. Finally, they approached the rear of the plane, and he asked her to sit for a second while he grabbed the intercom at the rear of the plane. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce our special guest sitting in seat 42C. Let's give her a round of applause. The whole plane went wild with laughter and applause. I loved every moment of it. Yes, thank you. The public shaming of selfish people really is a wonderful thing. I don't know what the captain was going through, but he'd evidently had enough of this kind of person on his flights and decided that he was taking collective revenge. Glorious. Part of my brain is wondering how long the plane was held up by this stunt and how many of the passengers had connecting flights that were imperiled by it. But then again, my planes have come into airports a few minutes early a lot of times, so who knows? Personally, I'm of the wait until the queue of people moving out has reached my row before I even stand up camp, so I have zero understanding of this Karen. My grandma told everyone at my school that I'm, quote, into older guys, and now they all think that I'm freaky. My grandma is an interesting individual. One may place her in the Karen category. She's from a small town where you're either very well off and waspy, or you do smack and live in an old school that's been made into an apartment building. She's on the waspy side. Knows everything and everyone, always will find something about you to nitpick at. Fun times. The best times was 8th grade. She's a math teacher in my school for junior high. Oh boy, was that a dandy time. Because I was her granddaughter, that put a huge target on me. Every day she'd watch me like a hawk and wait for the split second I'd look away, then shout, "Susie, pay attention. Don't make me tell your mother you're goofing off in my class." And the whole class would giggle. She'd grin and her ego would inflate like swim shorts when you first walk into the water. One time I accidentally wore slippers to school, and for the rest of the year she'd bring it up, like, "Can you not remember the equation like you couldn't remember your shoes?" Cue the malicious grins and laughter. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when I got a boyfriend. A bit of backstory here. I was held back in kindergarten, so I'm a year older than everyone in my 8th grade class. I was dating a boy in 10th grade, but he skipped ahead a grade, so he's actually a year younger than his 10th grade class. This made our age difference to be only about a year apart. However, from an outside perspective, when you hear a 10th grade boy is dating an 8th grade girl, I'm sure your first reaction would be like, ew. And boy did my grandma eat that up like it was her very last meal. Anytime we would visit, she'd make side comments like, "We know that she prefers older men, right? You know? If it was my child, I certainly wouldn't approve, but I guess times are a little different now." It was annoying, but it wasn't interfering with my life. That is, until she started to gossip about me to other teachers. She'd tell them that I was sneaking around with an older boy. I was probably experimenting with things not meant for my age, that I was going into teachers' lounges and bathrooms with him. She also heavily implied that my parents were against all of this. For context, my parents know how old both me and my boyfriend were and actually aren't crazy like grandma. Also, my boyfriend was the quietest, nerdiest kid in his grade. It took us both 2 weeks of holding hands before we even kissed, so none of this was true. But that didn't stop the rumors. During lunch, I'd get asked by girls if it was true that I'd done certain deeds with him. If I was in class and I'd ask a teacher to use the restroom, they would refuse. And if they did let me go, they would interrogate me for several minutes first to make sure I wasn't sneaking off to, quote, do it with my older boyfriend. Before any of this, I was literally a fly on the wall and I was completely fine with that. Now I was miserable and I felt helpless. After coming home crying for who knows how many days in a row, my mum got fed up. I remember her screaming, "That's it!" grabbing her keys and storming out the door. When she returned, she said that Grandma wouldn't be bothering me anymore. Once I got older, she told me a brief summary of what happened. Basically, my mum arrived and approached her calmly, explained to her that I was her child and she has control of the situation. She even explained the age difference. After asking her politely to back off and stop telling her lies to her co-workers, my teachers, Grandma scoffed and said, "You don't know what she could be doing behind closed doors. I'm just keeping an eye out for her." And this set my mum off. She told me that she started yelling at my grandma about shaming her own granddaughter and how miserable I was. She said she has no right to say or do any of this and what she was doing was cruel and inappropriate. My grandma's response? "How dare you enter my home and accuse me of this? Get out of my house." So my mum left. The next day, my grandma avoided eye contact with me. She didn't even try to call on me for answers or point out what kind of clothes I was wearing. She just averted her gaze and did her job. Finally. Rumors continued just for a little bit, but then people caught on that it wasn't really as scandalous as the rumors portrayed, and we were left alone. So, how did all of this end? Like you'd expect, Grandma acts like it never happened. Never brings it up. Avoids the conversations if they're around the time when she taught me. It's irritating, but at the same time, it's expected. Now I'm an adult and we're all aware of her silly ways, we can just smile and nod until we go home, where we can then rant about how mean she was during dinner. I have so many more Karen-like stories involving her. Alright, answering some questions and updates. My 10th grade boyfriend and I broke up a few months later. We were both young. We still talk occasionally and we're both doing fine with our lives. I never went to the principal because he was actually even worse than Grandma. The school we went to had a graduating class of under 75. The teachers were all hired because of status and relationships. The principal was a very angry man who would scream at us every lunch period like he was a military officer. So I didn't feel like I was supported at all by the staff in general. And that same principal married one of his elementary school students once she was 18. Now she's a teacher. If that gives you an idea on how things were run in the school. And by the way, that school is still thriving. It's surrounded by crystal heads and Republicans, so that must be it. My mum is the sassiest woman I know. I'm very lucky to have her as a role model. I don't know if I will ever actually try to bring up what happened with my grandma again, because in a way I can already hear in my head how it would go. I can even hear her voice turning into that crazy high-pitched, whiny shriek, and I like my eardrums too much to do that to them. When I have time, maybe I'll post another story about the time she made us all cry on Christmas. Yeah, this sounds like the kind of grandparent that we all just sort of tolerate rather than the one we have a close relationship with. Once we're no longer obligated to see them, that is. And my goodness, her views are so skewed. In her brain, looking out for her granddaughter and fabricating rumors that turn her into a pariah are one and the same thing. It must have been miserable living with that sort of stuff in any school, and the fact that the other educators bought into it and actively took actions against her is sick. And holy crap, can we talk about the facts that the author squeezed into the end about her school? What's going on there? A crazy military principal who's just sort of grooming a wife out of the students? Why is that okay and not a perfectly innocent relationship between two quiet nerdy kids? These accusations are all confessions, aren't they? And yes, the narrator did do a search for the gossip on how Grandma ruined Christmas, but he couldn't find anything. From the way they described her reaction after she was called out for her behavior, it sounds like this kind of granny tantrum, followed by just complete silence, was pretty normal for the family. So I'm sure they all continued to grit their teeth through future family gatherings anyway. I'm not going to pay for your comfort. So this happened last month. By some universe coincidences, me and my girlfriend ended up living with another couple in a rented house to split costs. It was a big house, so each couple would have their own bathroom, bedroom, and we shared the common places like the kitchen and the living room. The house was originally rented by a co-worker who by the time of this story was no longer in the house anymore, but all the furniture was his and he gifted it all to me when he left. This other couple was really annoying. They'd leave their dirty dishes in the sink with rotten food and didn't wash them until the weekend. or leave their dog to poop all over the house. One time, the guy was cooking in a torn-out pair of shorts and his underwear were very visible. This was really uncomfortable to my girlfriend. Anytime I talked to them about all the issues that bothered us, they used to change their habits for a few days and then it was all the same. But the house was rented and they arrived first, so I wasn't able to kick them out. And if I tried, I was afraid of the guy since he was a bad-tempered jerk. The last straw was this summer. It was really hot and these chuckle frickers liked to have the AC on at full blast day and night, even when they weren't home. And if I turned it off, they'd get mad and immediately turn it back on, after telling me how they couldn't sleep without the AC at max. Okay, I did my best to wear a hoodie and sleep with my winter clothes in the middle of the fricking summer inside my house, just so they'd be comfortable and for the sake of saving a few bucks in rent money. And of course, the inevitable happened. The electric bill came and it was 4 times higher than the usual. And it was a lot. So I talked to them about how their use of electricity was out of control and why we should split the bill 25-75. Since me and my girl are almost never home. It turned into a huge fight and his only argument was that we all use the electricity so we should all pay the same. He wouldn't listen to my arguments and there was nothing I could do. I ended up paying the same amount. After this absolute tool and his girlfriend made me pay for their comfort, they started doing a lot of passive-aggressive stuff. Like throwing out my unspoiled food while they'd leave their rotten food in my fridge, or using their TV at the highest volume while I tried to sleep. I get up really early to exercise before work, so I go to sleep really early too. They did a lot of things like that in a very childish manner. This was in addition to leaving on every kind of electrical device in the house while they were out. Then I knew I had to get out of that house. There was no money saving anymore due to the high cost of the bills, so me and my girlfriend started to look for a place for only the 2 of us and our 2 rescued dogs. We found an affordable and comfortable house with plenty of room for our doggos, so we pulled the trigger. We talked to the owner of the previous house about us leaving and he had no problems at all. So it was all set. We waited until the other couple were out of town for the weekend and we took every last thing we owned out of that house and moved out. I'm including the stuff left to us by my old co-worker, by the way. I left them without any furniture, and I mean no stove, no microwave, and not even a table to eat at. I left my keys at the entrance of their bedroom door and a note that said, "We couldn't bear your attitudes anymore, so we left with our belongings. Have a nice life, wasting your own money. Love, Steve." The owner of the house, who became a very good friend of mine later, told me that they told him how I took out all their belongings. He knew that they were mine and he told them as much. I wish I was there to have a look at their faces. Have fun eating fast food on the floor, jerks. In short, me and my girlfriend used to live with a couple of absolute monsters. We left with everything in the house. Was that too harsh? Were we the jerks? I'd say you were more or less justified. You got permission from your landlord, and honestly it sounds like they were sloppy, exploitative monsters. As somewhat of a clean freak, I can accept that there are certain habits from other people that you just have to accept, but come on, surely the line is drawn several kilometers before the point where you have rotten food and literal animal feces littering your apartment. In the words of the world's worst spy, this is how you get ants. But yeah, you got permission from your landlord, took your possessions, and clearly the owner thought you were completely justified in doing so. The fact that you apparently had a portable stove and could get the bonus satisfaction of leaving them without a means to cook food for themselves must have been particularly sweet. And then they went and confirmed what we were already thinking about them by making fraudulent claims that the author had stolen their property. I dread to think of the state of that place after the other 2 had moved out. The conditions there likely got into a state that one can only call squalid. I don't envy the desperate people that they likely tricked into moving in there with them afterwards, nor the abundance of bugs and vermin that their nasty habits likely would have brought in over the summer. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for celebrating my anniversary despite what happened at my wedding? My husband and I had our wedding last year. The venue was beautiful and bordered a lake. Unfortunately, during the reception, one of the young children snuck away from their parents and decided to go for a swim despite not being able to. This was tragic and devastating, and obviously cut the day short. We haven't really spoken to the parents since then, as we weren't close to them aside from seeing them on holidays, which haven't happened this year, 2020. We're still Facebook friends though. When our first anniversary came, I made a post celebrating our anniversary, with a few wedding photos. I didn't think anything of it until the comments came flooding in. I woke up to 30 comments and 15 missed calls. The top comment was from the mother of the child who was outraged about it. She wrote a very long comment about how my post was disrespectful of the tragedy that had happened that day and how dare I post that and not mention her child, and of course not talk to her about posting first. 30 comments later, and it was clear that the entire family had clearly started taking sides in a battle I didn't even realize I'd created. As of today, we're at 150 comments. My friends and my parents are involved too. Half of his family is screaming for me to take it down, apologize to the parents, and show more respect, possibly by even celebrating our anniversary on a different day. Some of the family think that we should still be able to celebrate our anniversary on the actual day, but just to keep it offline to keep the peace. I don't think I did anything wrong with my post, and I feel like we should be allowed to celebrate our anniversary just like anyone else. I'm not celebrating the tragedy, I'm celebrating my wedding. Okay, so an update. I've changed the post to only be visible to me, and deleted all the comments to try and stop the arguing. But from the email we just received, those comments were just a symptom of a larger problem. My mother-in-law sent us an email with, from what I can tell, roughly 3/4 of my husband's family CC'd in. His parents, grandparents, and the parents of the child are not only in the different day camp, but they're also demanding a second wedding. According to them, they've kept their silence for so long due to shock and being distracted by everything else going on this year, 2020 again. But they feel like because of what happened, me and my husband aren't really married yet in the eyes of the family. They, quote, understand that weddings are expensive. So they, the husband's parents, offered to completely pay for the second wedding that will be the real wedding in his family's eyes, and because it may be a year or two before this can be done safely, they will tolerate us living in sin indefinitely due to the circumstances. My husband hates arguing with his family, and I'm not sure how I would even approach this with my family without being laughed out of the room. So now we need to talk about what to do with this. Second update. I've never had this many calls in my life. My husband and I have tried to read through this and have gotten a chance to actually talk it out. We've avoided the subject for a long time because it's not an easy thing to think about, and it's not like this year hasn't had stresses of its own. He agrees that while something does need to happen, it's a priority that they start and continue to acknowledge that we are in fact married under law. I've had a conversation with my parents at least, who were exactly as they always were but are now aware of the full situation, and while they still wouldn't support a full second wedding, they understand that I have an exceptional situation and something exceptional needs to happen. I feel like I should address some things that people are asking me about. 1. I did send condolences and I attended the funeral. By not speaking, I meant since the funeral. I mistakenly thought that would be implied. I'm not heartless. What happened at the wedding day is really hard to talk about it, which is why I phrased it so lightly at the beginning of the story. I was trying to keep things to just what happened with the post and the event, which I can see coming across very strange over text. I'm also aware that I write very formally, but that's not something I can change. And finally, the pictures and caption didn't reference the wedding itself, and there was no lake visible in the pictures. I only used pictures that just had my husband and I in them, and I've sent pictures of just the bridal party before. I never have or will post pictures of the reception. Oh my god. So everything here just completely sucks, let's acknowledge that. I definitely don't think the author intended to hurt anyone by posting about the wedding where one of their friends' children died, but it sure as crap wasn't thought through very well. It's just such an awful situation for everyone, and having what is meant to be a completely magical event, one of the best of a couple's lives together, simultaneously contain one of the most tragic things that can take place, is just so frickin' dark. I don't think the author should have posted their wedding photos like that. The whole debate just makes me sad, so let me instead weigh in on their awful in-laws, people who I can say are just terrible, crappy humans without reserve. Imagine using this whole event to highlight that this couple are, quote, living in sin, and using this event to satisfy their own religious hang-ups. Gosh darn, but this is all just so damn sad. I don't know why they had to weigh in with this a year later, and after the bride and groom were clearly already going through something rough. Am I the jerk for cussing at a lady in the park? I, a 14-year-old boy, recently took my sister, 4 years old, to a park close to my house. She was pretty excited to go because her dad brought her a bicycle and she wanted to try it out. When we arrived, there was a lady with her 2 sons and a daughter. I made eye contact with the lady and just smiled and waved at her to be nice. After 15 minutes or so, my sister was playing on the swings because she got scared and didn't want to ride the bicycle anymore. I looked away for a second to say hello to my uncle since he lives close to us and he was passing by. And when I turned my head around to check on my sister, I saw she was crying and the lady's sons were using my sister's bike. I approached the kids and politely asked them to please leave the bike alone and use theirs. These 3 kids had brought their own bikes. They ignored me and continued to play with the bike. I decided to go up to the lady and ask her if she could talk to her sons. She responded with, "My kids are having fun and yours isn't using the bike, so I don't see the problem." I then responded with, "I'm aware that she isn't using it, but it's her bike and your kids have their bikes, so I don't see a reason for them to use hers." She then started going on about how I have no reason to talk to her like that if I was going to go around getting girls pregnant, insinuating that my sister was my daughter. At this point, I was teed off and I didn't really want to deal with this lady, so I angrily said, "Lady, that's my sister, and I believe I have the right to talk considering I'm not being a little B-word. So I'm going to ask again. Are you going to tell your little rats to get off my sister's bike or not?" She then got up and told her kids to get in the car. Later, when I got home, I told my mum about it, thinking she'd see it as a funny story. Boy, was I wrong. She started going on about how I was so rude to that lady and that I need to learn respect for my elders. Am I the jerk? No, you're not. You were nice at first, you made your point reasonably, and then she decided that just being of a certain age allowed her to do whatever she wanted, right or wrong. If you think that being told off by a 14-year-old boy is more wrong than letting your kids take toys off a toddler, you need to assess everything you're doing. End of story. I learned Taekwondo, punched my boss, and slammed her into the ground, and she started respecting me. Part 1. When I was a 15-year-old girl, I worked at a major donut shop chain in Canada. Yeah, you know the one. There are more of these shops than McDonald's here, and everyone goes there. It's like a cult. I used to work at a corporate store that trained new franchisees and retrained old ones that were cutting corners. Yikes. In addition to our regular operations. I used to train franchisees on how to operate the back-end baking shift from 4 a.m. until noon. I loved my work. I loved meeting new people, I loved showing them the process, I loved my company, and I loved my 2 managers. It was great. Except when it came to my inspector. Let's call her Mary. Mary was a district inspector and she had it in for all of us there. Our staff would see her red car in the parking lot and scramble to tidy up. She loved coming in when we were slammed, with a line up out the door, tables needing to be cleared, donuts flying off the racks, and everyone just trying to keep up. Never mind taking your break. People used to freak when they saw her car pull up. She was slim with big curly orange hair and a mean streak. She was an in-house inspector that worked for corporate and seemed to really enjoy her job, marking faults and handing her reports to our managers for them to file. She enjoyed her work until she came into the kitchen when I was working, which was most days. She hated it when I worked. Because I had to train people all the time, I had to keep a clean kitchen, with everything stocked, because it needed to be ready for the next shift where I trained people. It was also in great shape because the cleaning and refilling and prepping and operating the kitchen to code was what I did with the franchisees while training them. It more or less took care of itself. It also didn't hurt that I was a perfectionist. Mary didn't seem to like that at all. She would find any excuse to dock me points. I think she was a little obsessed with it. She would go to great lengths to catch me screwing up. Even my managers, who regularly rotated through other stores, felt bad for me. They said they've never seen that happen to anyone else like that. Mary would get irritated when she couldn't find much to report because she never wanted to give a perfect pass. So she would look hard. She would pull out heavy, old, out-of-circulation mixers from the bottom shelves and run her hands along the back to check for dust. Ha! Mary, I wipe that crap on the regular. It must have made her blood boil. and it would always come down to docking me points for my shoes. My shoes were dark navy, not black, and therefore weren't uniform compliant. I couldn't afford to buy work shoes, making minimum wage and all. Every time she visited, she would condescendingly point them out and tell me how I should know better, implying that I was lucky she didn't pursue it. She'd dock me points and drop off the paperwork to my managers with a smug smile. Bonus, if she could find a cobweb, that would be in the report too. I hated her. She almost brought me to tears when she'd do this. She knew how proud I was and how seriously I took my job. She just couldn't let me have that. I was also so confused by it because I had no negative history with her. I really took it personally. At the time, I was also the kind of person that would beat myself up over things and was really critical of myself, so this put a lot of fuel on the fire. Maybe she felt I'd make her look bad if she gave a perfect score. I'll never know. Part 2. I'd been taking Taekwondo at the time. I had an athletic background when I initially started, so I advanced quickly and was competing quite early for my belt level. During class, we'd do our warm-ups, patterns, and finish by partnering up and practicing holds, throws, self-defense, sparring, among other things. Occasionally, when new students wanted to try a class, this is where they'd join in so that they could interact with other students. We didn't rubberneck to see who came in. Our instructor would just announce it and choose someone to pair with them. A lot of students didn't like partnering with newbies because it was boring. Although I would have rather trained with someone more advanced than me, I didn't mind being patient with a new student. My instructor welcomed someone called Mary to the class and directed me to pair up with her. I turned around and holy crap, there she was. I think we both had the same thought. Oh my god, is this really happening now? This is totally happening right now. It was surreal, like I was dreaming. I just kept staring at her and thinking blankly, what the frick? During class, I got to show her how to defend against an attack from the rear, where you drop down to lower your center of gravity, rear elbow strike the assailant in the gut, grab their arm and use your leverage to flip them over your shoulder and onto their back on the hard ground in front of you. Then kneel on them to pin them while striking them in the solar plexus. I demonstrated that to her over and over. I might also add that I killed her with kindness while doing so, and not just because it was so enjoyable to witness, but because I'm not the type to be mean in that situation anyway. I encouraged her to demonstrate on me too, and I'd correct her and have her try again. Which, let's be honest, was completely ineffective because she didn't know what she was doing. I'd say things like, almost got it, Mary, you just need to lower yourself like this so you can flip the attacker like this. Wham! On her back again. That was a good 30 minutes, but I guarantee it felt longer for her. The day after, I ran into work screaming, "You will never believe what happened last night!" My managers were giddy like children, and it was high fives all around. Mary came back for a few more classes, which was shocking. My instructor paired us every time. I think he saw how enthusiastic and patient I was with her and wanted to foster that relationship. Every morning after Taekwondo, my managers would want the updates immediately. How was it? Tell me all about it. What did you get to do to her this time? Do an impression of her. Show me what her face was like. I don't think she thought she could physically hurt me because that was highly unlikely. But she did have a huge ego and maybe wanted to show me she wasn't afraid of me or that it didn't bother her because she was tough. Her ego was causing her physical pain and humiliation every week. Something had to give. And for the record, I wasn't really trying to go hard on her either. I was as neutral as I could be while properly executing the throws and submissions. I think that was obvious to her and to my instructor, who happily chose me to work with her time after time. He had no idea. Just like at my job, I did what I do best, patiently train new people while exemplifying proper form. Mary dropped out after about 4 weeks, maybe less. It was a grand effort, Mary. After that, I rarely even saw her at my work anymore. I think she used to time her visits around my shift or on my break. Sometimes I thought I saw her car driving out of the parking lot, and my managers would tell me that yes, that was her, and my report would just be left on the table in the back. She never docked points on me again. That crap was perfect. Haha! I do have to say that although Mary sounds like she was a really annoying jerk, you have to respect that she kept coming into the classes for a while and didn't want to give up. But then again, 4 weeks of just being repeatedly flipped over and taken into submission, even if it's done harmlessly, isn't great for anyone's self-esteem. But I don't know what her deal was in that store. She honestly just sounds like the biggest, nastiest jerk who was just out to get the author specifically. I think being an inspector who specifically comes in at rush hour every time is kind of telling. I mean, sure, come once or twice to make sure the store operates well and doesn't cut corners under tough conditions, by all means. But surely both you and the regular staff can do without that extra stress in your lives. And it sounds like the author ran a tighter ship than just about any restaurant or even fast food place that I've ever seen. If you pulled the old equipment out of the backs of the drawers in some places I've worked at, you might get a lot worse than dust is all I'm saying. So the author was really onto it, and I don't know why Mary would just go so out of her way to bully a 15-year-old girl who honestly just seems like a better employee than any adult in hospitality. Get a life, Mary. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Yelled at by a customer at work. This happened to me in March of 2020, just as the lockdown started and many stores had started having special shopping hours for elderly and high-risk customers. I worked at a grocery store on the overnight stock crew, and my shift ended at the same time the special hours started. I'd frequently pick up items I needed at the end of my shift before heading home. On this particular morning, we'd finally gotten a shipment of toilet paper and cleaning wipes in. I picked up a 12-pack of the cheapest toilet paper in the store and a canister of Clorox wipes for my mum, who is high risk. I wasn't wearing my black work polo because I was 7 months pregnant, and it didn't fit, so I was allowed to wear a plain black t-shirt instead. I picked up a few food items and headed for the register. I ended up in line behind an older woman. She said very pointedly to the cashier, who's a friend of mine, that we needed to be more strict on the elderly and high-risk guidelines. She looked straight at me as she said it. She said we needed to have a guard at the doors to make sure no one was coming in during the special hours, except those that actually needed to shop at those times. At our store, it was from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day. This lady also said that if the stores let other people in to shop, they should make sure they don't buy the essentials that other people need, looking at the toilet paper and Clorox wipes in my hands. Now, my co-worker is an elderly woman, and she's not shy. She's a spitfire, and she'll tell you what she thinks and doesn't give two craps about what you think. She looks straight at the woman and says, "There's a limit on essential items. You can't buy 2 packs of toilet paper." The customer had 2 of the biggest packs of toilet paper that we sold. We're talking 18 rolls each. The woman snapped at her with a, "Fine, whatever, but I'm not coming in here if you're going to keep letting other people in during the special hours. I want to speak to a manager." Bet you didn't see that coming, folks. My co-worker calls the manager on duty, who happens to be my manager on the overnight crew. He approaches and this woman goes off, yelling about how we're letting regular people shop during the special hours, how the cashier was rude and was limiting her, among other things. She just went full Karen. My manager looks at me and can see that I'm irritated. He looks at the customer and straight up says, "I would like for you to leave." She got angry and asked why she should be the one to leave when she was clearly following the rules of the shopping hours, and I was not. He said, and I'll never forget this for the rest of my life, "This customer you're harassing is my best employee. She just finished working a 9-hour shift to fill these shelves so that you could come in to buy your essentials. She's picking up a few items after her shift, and on top of that, you're harassing a pregnant woman who's considered high risk and has as much of a right to shop during these hours as you do. She's exhausted and she's scared because of the pandemic, but she comes in every night, works extra hours, and busts her butt so people like you can come in and talk down to her. You can leave now and you're welcome to stay out." And he walked away. She tried to stammer an apology at me and ask about my baby, when I was due, what I was having, among other things, when the loss prevention guy showed up to escort her out. I ignored her and picked up 1 of her packs of toilet paper instead of the 12-pack that I'd grabbed. I checked out my items and was on my way while loss prevention took her picture and made notes that she was banned from the store for 30 days for harassing an employee. Sorry for the long story. And yes, that manager was the best manager I've ever had. He's the only reason I stayed with the company for as long as I did. And thank you to everyone asking about the health of myself, my baby, and my mum. About 2 weeks after this story happened, I had to have an emergency C-section and give birth to a 4-pound, 8-ounce baby boy. We spent 3 weeks in the hospital, but he's doing fantastic. My mum has been working from home and being cautious, so she stayed healthy. She has Crohn's disease, and the meds she takes for it are immunosuppressive. She looks completely healthy and gets lots of nasty looks too. It sucks that people judge each other so often. Unfortunately, I came back from maternity leave to find that my favorite manager had retired while I was gone, and I changed jobs about a month later. I'm still an essential worker, but now I'm not out in public, where I have a higher chance of catching the Rona. Thanks again for listening. In short, a woman was banned from a grocery store for 30 days after being an absolute witch to me at work. So yeah, I'll say that the lady in the story is definitely a bit of an annoying old bat, the kind that you'd roll your eyes at when they entered the store if they were a regular. I will give her some credit for apologizing and trying to de-escalate once she realized the situation, though. The beginning of the pandemic was a rough and high-stress time, and maybe this was a release of something, but yeah, I don't know why she couldn't just trust that there was a reason why this lady was in the queue behind her. Because apparently she was blind enough to not see that she was preggo, or ignorant enough about the rules to not know that she could only grab one stack of paper, or that people who were pregnant were also high risk. I'm going to file this under bored person who wanted an excuse to complain and then got exactly what she asked for. Just do what the rest of us do when we think we see someone breaking the rules. Mutter under your breath, go home and complain about it. I will say that I think that maybe the staff were a little harsh on her considering she apologized. I do hope that there was somewhere else she could go to get her stuff. If this was a small town or something, condemning a senior citizen to starve seems like a bit of an overreaction. But hey, as we said, tensions were high. Keep complaining? Well, enjoy your vacay in a construction site. This happened a long time ago when I worked on cruise ships. We always had jerks from the internet forum Cruise Critic. This guy had printed a sign saying, "I'm a cruise critic," and put it on his cabin door. Basically, these people expect special service and complain about absolutely everything to get free upgrades, drinks, or even a free cruise. As soon as he got on board, he complained about his cabin and was upgraded to the balcony suite to shut him up. It still wasn't good enough. He kept complaining that his TV reception wasn't crystal clear. We visited his cabin and saw no issue with the image. In fact, it was better than most TVs, as it was closer to the amplifier for that section. After replacing said TV anyway and explaining that we're tracking a geostationary TV satellite on a moving ship with a gyro-stabilized dish and millions of dollars of above and below decks equipment, he still kept complaining that the picture wasn't as clear as his TV at home. After 48 hours of him complaining and demanding a complimentary cruise, he was already cruising for free after complaining so much about his last cruise, we just decided to plan our revenge. When we knew he was at his allocated dining time, my AV team showed up in the cabin and gathered a team of engineers, fitters, and electricians. We stripped all of the wall and roof panels and pulled out all of the AV wiring, dumping a buttload of dust everywhere before downing tools and calling it a day. After the guest and his wife returned after dinner and a show, he called the front desk, furious that his cabin had been turned into an uninhabitable construction site. It was explained to him that we had listened to his demands and as such were rewiring his cabin to ensure he has crystal clear TV reception, just like he asked. He was advised it would take a few days, the rest of the cruise, as it was a complex job. He went quiet before asking to be moved to another cabin. He was moved to a cabin smaller than his original cabin and above the bow thrusters. He was not heard from again for the rest of the cruise. Were we too harsh? I think you were harsh, but it did shut him up and he was a massive tool. So it's a jerk vigilante cape for you and your co-workers as far as I'm concerned. Go hard. If any of our listeners were wondering whether there's a male alternative to the Karens who seem to go through life attempting to complain, not pay, and grift as much free stuff as possible, I would like to offer up this jerk. What an absolute moron. Oh, and printing off a sign that he was from a review site in order to maybe get preferential treatment? Get effed, Cruise Ken. And I love that he got downgraded far below his original room. We all know that he was only complaining about non-existent TV issues to get more free stuff. He was on a free cruise to begin with and was just looking to continue the streak. Do the rest of us complain when an in-flight or on-boat entertainment isn't as good as our stuff at home? No, we know that would be ridiculous. Next. My father's revenge against the neighborhood punks. This story is a little old, taking place around 2000 or so. Anyways, during that summer, there was a rash of punks who would go and vandalize houses, cars, and pretty much anything else they could do to raise hell. It was so bad that they'd keep stealing the hubcaps off my father's Grand National. as well as try and get in to steal the radios and change. He was forced to keep it unlocked as it was cheaper than them breaking the windows. The police would always take their sweet time getting here too. It would take 20 minutes or so to send one officer here, even though I could walk to the station in that amount of time. By then, those kids would have run off and gotten away. My father is an engineer by trade and decided to get back at them, as right after he replaced the hubcaps, they'd be there that night to take them. My father went to the hardware store and brought some wires, razor blades, and grabbed a few car batteries he had in the garage. What he did was truly diabolical. He took a little glue on the inside of the door handles, then secured razor blades to cut anyone who attempted to open the door. Next, he stripped some of the wires he got and wrapped them around the hubcaps, making sure they were pressed tight against them. He took another wire and used a little tape and glue to have the wire hovering over the other wires so that if someone were to grab them, it would complete the circuit and either burn or shock them. Eventually, he was able to get them all rigged before running the wire ends back to the batteries. He connected them and then went inside. That night, my father left the windows open slightly so he could listen for them. Sure enough, sometime after midnight, those little crap bags came back. But after a few yells, they seemed to leave rather quickly. The morning revealed a fair amount of blood around the handle, which then trailed down the driveway. One of the hubcaps had melted slightly from the heat of the wire, but the others were not triggered. Needless to say, they didn't seem to come back after that one. I just wish we had a security system that also had cameras so I could watch those morons get it. Wow. I mean, I'm mildly concerned that your dad may have put someone in hospital, but then again, they were messing around and doing illegal stuff, and you've kind of got to understand that the worst can happen to you when you do that. You're going to repeatedly vandalize one guy's car, that guy is probably going to do something to stop that. In certain parts of the US, I figured that it might be a great way to catch a bullet. I hope that at least nobody copped any injuries that a night in hospital couldn't fix, and that maybe this put a stop to the kids' shenanigans in the area in general, although that feels a bit optimistic. Who knows? I hacked my sister's PC and read her Facebook messages to learn the truth about her. This all took place many years ago when I was a freshman in high school. I'd bought an iPod Nano, which was hot stuff back then, with money that I'd earned by helping my neighbor. And as I didn't make much, I was pretty protective of my iPod. My scumbag sister had also recognized that it was worth a few hundred. As I later found out, she had stolen it and given it to a friend temporarily until the heat was off. I suspected this immediately when it wasn't on my desk, where I knew where I left it. I asked my parents if I'd done something that warranted punishment, but neither had touched it. Clearly, I needed evidence to pin my sister. As a freshman, I was pretty computer savvy. At the time, I was learning a few programming languages and had kind of a good feel for novice hacking. Nothing serious, but enough to get in trouble at school kind of thing. I got to work on a spy tool. My plan was to get into her email and Facebook where I hoped to find evidence. At the very least, I could mess up her account and get revenge. A few hours of work later and the program was done. And it was way more than a simple spy tool. Although I honestly had no idea how to make a spy tool at the time, I damn sure knew how to write a batch file that would mess up your Windows partition 6 ways to Sunday. I'd basically written a carpet bomb that had the same icon as Internet Explorer. The virus, can I call it that, was armed when you replaced the default Internet Explorer exe file with the malicious file that shared the same file name and icon. Of course, when you went to run Internet Explorer, you set it off. The original file would be launched after the virus ran, so everything was still usable. Of course, my original goal was still carried out. I'd packaged in a simple keylogger, which records keystrokes, that any decent antivirus would have noticed instantly. But once my sister was out of the house, there was nothing stopping me from ripping her antivirus out by the roots, which I did, and then planted the virus. A few hours later, she came home and started her normal computer browsing. Logged in, opened Internet Explorer, checked Facebook and email, this was before Twitter I guess, among other things, but today was a little different. She probably didn't notice, but Internet Explorer lagged a little bit when she opened it. That's because Internet Explorer had to execute a few little things before it extracted, and then launched the real browser application. For instance, a few files, marked hidden with innocent names, were copied to her startup folder, waiting to execute at the next login. The keylogger was embedded deep into the system and was started right up, and within a minute her passwords were saved in a protected file log. She was completely unaware. Of course, that all changed in about 20 minutes. The virus, which was running in the background, ran a fake error message that caused a reboot. There appears to be a diverbam obstructing your flow of internet connection. Code red, reboot required. She was somehow dumb enough to not instantly realize that this was some sort of malware and just patiently waited for the login screen. As soon as she logged back in, the hidden startup files ran and she was greeted with some weird message and important-looking command prompt windows, which were busy doing important things like deleting system files and corrupting huge registry chunks. Suddenly, she was getting errors about things like her hard drive being jammed with peanut butter and Windows has detected an intelligence deficit in the user. Consider a system upgrade, complete with an annoying beep noise every time she tried to close it. Her CD tray kept popping open no matter how many times she closed it. She even got a snarky message, "Put it in me, babe," every time it opened back up. Meanwhile, in the background, a small script uploaded the keylogger file to my FTP account and deleted the keylogging portion as well as the hidden startup files, just in case an investigation was done. Naturally, this triggered her mashing the power button and waiting for the screen to turn off. She knew something wasn't right as soon as she had the login screen and everything was at 640 by 480 resolution. At this point, she asked me to come and fix it. Because I was the computer nerd in the house, I had to contain my laughter. Just try logging in. This is really weird. I have no idea why this would happen. The desktop was a beautiful pixel collection featuring 256 colors. That was a lot a couple of decades ago, and barely distinguishable icons. Her theme was set to Windows Classic, which she hates with a passion. She's one of those people who spend hours customizing the look of icons, cursors, and other meaningless things. Unfortunately for her, I had plans with friends and couldn't help her with her computer. Sorry about that, sis. All programs and hardware drivers were gone, so she had no luck running a browser amidst the chaos, or even getting an internet connection in the first place. In the end, I got my iPod. I spoke to her the next day and asked for it back. Naturally, she claimed not to have it. She didn't know that I'd read her Facebook messages and already knew that her friend had it. She and her friend were messaging about how to turn it off or something. I asked my parents right in front of her, "Can you ask her to show her Facebook messages just so she can clear herself?" I thought I heard her saying something to her friend about the iPod and about how she'd talk about it on Facebook. Sure enough, my sister broke down and said that she was just borrowing it. Obviously, my parents forced her to show the messages, which clearly proved how it was a little more than borrowing that she had in mind. My dad recommended that she have someone fix her laptop. Luckily, I was around to do it, and for $20, I'd be happy to reinstall Windows. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was how I got even with my sister. I'm so sorry this was a gosh darn novel, but I hope you enjoyed it. Wow, this was certainly on track to set up a sibling rivalry for the ages. I can't help but think you might have just been able to do the messenger thing from the start, but then again, your sister did try to rob you of a few $100s of property, so why not stealth break her computer and charge her to fix it? As per usual, I'm going to say that, yeah, she's a jerk, but they were also presumably teens, so there was a time and room to change in the future. Seems like when they were presented with evidence, your parents were prepared to step in and enforce the law, so in the end, justice was served. Also, if it sounds like the narrator was just blindly reading off the script when it came to descriptions of the various hacking terminologies, that's because that's exactly what was happening. The kid had more computer knowledge in his early teens than most people I know do in their adult computer-based jobs. Seems like he was just destined for a bright career in IT. Just to think that his history of paid work in that field started with a humble $20 system reboot of your brat sister's laptop in the early years of your life. Such humble beginnings. Of child-free weddings and entitled parents losing their minds. My fiancé and I are going to get married in a few months. And we've decided we don't want kids at the wedding. Kids are loud, they run around, they break things, and we don't want to have to deal with that on a day that we're supposed to celebrate our relationship on. We've assigned the roles that are usually performed by children to our beloved pets. My dog will be the flower girl, my fiancé's dog will be the ring bearer, and my two cats are co-maids of honor. Our friends, boyfriends, sisters, and my boyfriends and their partners think this is adorable. Alas, our other relatives do not share this enthusiasm. My boyfriend's parents said they thought it was strange and were hoping that his cousin would be the ring bearer, but they've accepted it because they want us to be happy. And my parents threw a fricking fit and accused me of placing animals above children. I calmly explained to them that this was my fiancé's and mine wedding, and it really wasn't their place to decide who could be a part of it. Our pets are well-trained and well-behaved, which is more than I can say about our relatives' kids. My parents aren't coming to my wedding because I refused to follow a certain sexist wedding tradition, that of the father giving away the daughter. My dad told me that since I was robbing him of his moment, there was no reason for him to be there. Good fricking riddance. One of the friends I've known since childhood is a mother of 3 and was going to be one of the bridesmaids. She was horrified when she learned that my dog and cats will be in the wedding party. Surely her 3 ill-mannered children should have that honor. She threatened to not come to the wedding. I made it easier for her by taking her name off the guest list. My cousin, who has 2 kids, told me, rather smugly, that she'd bring her kids anyway. When she and her family were actually there, surely I won't be able to do anything about it. I told her I'd have her husband, and her kids escorted out by security. And that shut her up. My fiancé's friend asked for him to make me replace my dog with his daughter as the flower girl. He was warned to never bring it up again. This wedding will be a special day for my fiancé and we will not let other people's entitlement ruin it. And many of you in the comments have expressed concern that the wedding will be too stressful for our pets. I assure you it won't be. First of all in all, 32 people will be there, all of whom our pets know and are comfortable around them. Second of all, the ceremony won't be a traditional one that lasts over an hour. Ours will be over in about 15 minutes. Our pets won't be at the reception, which can be overstimulating for them. Someone else sent me a message asking if the kids' feelings will be hurt. I doubt any child actually enjoys weddings. Plus, we'll be sending all of the children of relatives and friends gift baskets with toys, chocolates, and other things. I think they'll be pretty happy. Okay, I get that this couple's ruling is strict, but the sheer entitlement and disrespect coming from their guests is something else. Parents outraged that you are ruining their special day? Friends saying that they're going to crash your wedding with their kids in tow? If trawling the feedback to the story taught me one thing, it's that kids don't enjoy weddings. I know all of us adults love the chance to see our friends happy, get drunk and dance and hook up with other non-newlyweds, but from my hazy early childhood memories, a wedding is basically being told to not move or talk during a boring long ceremony and then playing tag with a bunch of strangers' kids outside. Apart from the divas who desperately want to be in the wedding party as flower girls or ring bearer boys, the regular ones who have to sit through it won't really feel like they're missing out on anything, right? But yeah, I can get that it seems like the couple are ruling over their wedding with an iron fist, but honestly, it's their special day. If you don't like it, don't come. It seems like they have a very well-defined idea of what they want for it. At least they aren't those jerks who insist that people coming to the hen or stag do's fork over thousands of bucks for the parties. Also, ring bearer and flower doggos? That's too cute. Oh. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My dog sent an entitled parent and her kid to jail. Sit back and enjoy. This is a long one because apparently I just don't do short stories. Many years ago, I was living in a beautiful, sunny southern state. I had a cute little house that was completely fenced in. A 5-foot fence in front, an 8-foot fence on the sides, and a 10-foot chain-link fence in the back. I'm fortunate enough to work from home. My office was my patio, unless it was raining. My dog, Sari, who's a German Shepherd and Rottweiler mix, kept me company. At a year old, she was a big girl at 120 pounds. She was generally very sweet and kind, but quite protective as well. She was well trained, but also had a knack for disappearing to play with her animal friends. So I kept her on a chain too if we were outside. High school kids in the area had the tendency to use the alleyway behind my house to get to and from school. Most would stop and say hi to Sari and give her attention. She loved it. I honestly didn't mind. One day I noticed that any time Sari was alone outside, some kids would rattle the back fence, throw things at it, then scream and yell at Sari. The kids would run off before I could see who they were. In case things got worse, I brought some security cameras and brought Sari with me anytime I went inside when the kids would be around. One day I had to grab some work in the house and left Sari outside, just for a moment. From inside I heard the fence rattle and then Sari yelp in pain. I rushed outside just in time to see a kid try to throw a rock at Sari along with some other kids. I was angry. As I rushed over to Sari, I calmly asked them, "Did it ever occur to you why I keep my dog chained in a fenced-in yard?" And then I unhooked her. Sari ran at my back fence, the 10-foot-high one, and climbed over it. The kids started running down the alley with Sari right behind them, barking away. I let her go about half a block, then whistled for her. She came trotting back as happy as can be. I checked her over and gave her a treat. She was fine. A couple of hours later, one of the kids came back with his mother. She was screaming, "You fricking B-word! You had your dog attack my son! He was only having a fun time. He's just a boy." This kid was at least 16 years old, by the way. "You scared him. He was just having a joke. You had no right to do that. I'm calling the police and having that dog fricking shot." And on she went. I literally couldn't get a word in. Then she started threatening me. So I called the police. The operator could hear her screaming as plain as day, even though she was at least 40 feet from me. The police showed up in about 5 minutes with 2 cars. I guess they were in the area. 4 officers, all very nice guys. 2 of the officers came to talk to me, and the other 2 talked to Karen and her son. Karen never stopped screaming and cussing. I explained what had happened and showed the video to the officers. I show all of Sari's vet and training paperwork, and I filed a report. I asked to press charges. The officers were petting Sari all the while because she's demanding attention from her new friends. She's got her happy face on. And yes, Sari actually smiles, it's very cute. The 3 of us and Sari, on a leash, go outside towards the other group. We're about 10 feet from them when Sari suddenly cuts in front of me and starts growling. The skin around her face went tight, making it look like a hair-covered skull. The hair on her back rose up. Sari's very scary when she's like that. Karen started screaming. "See? That witch raised that dog to attack black people. Fricking racist C-word. That fricking dog needs to be put down." The 2 officers that I'd just been talking to were African American, so no. Her claim always annoys me, so I included it. I called back one of the officers that I'd been talking to. He didn't want to come too close as Sari was showing large teeth. So I moved back towards my house as quietly as I could. I told the officer that either the entitled parent or the kid were carrying a gun. That's why Sari started getting protective. It had happened several times before. I guess to err on the side of caution or to shut me up, he decided to search Karen and the kid. Karen had an unregistered piece. The kid had a 6-inch switchblade, which is not legal in that state. So, in addition to a charge of animal cruelty, they got nailed for carrying a concealed weapon, being in possession of said weapon while on probation, resisting arrest, and a couple of other charges. Karen never stopped screaming the entire time this happened and while being driven away. I don't think that's how Karen or the kid expected to end their day, but I enjoyed it. Even better, I never saw her or her kid again, and the other kids stopped harassing Sari. What a good doggo. Yeah, this woman seems like a nutcase and clearly was no stranger to causing or at least being involved in crazy stuff before, given that she decided to show up to a neighborly dispute with an unregistered weapon, and a backup kid with a fricking switchblade. I'm glad the author in question didn't get her dog taken away. I'd say using one to chase and threaten the kid might have been a big deal, even if the kids were never actually in any danger, and it would also have been on your video evidence as well. Luckily, it seems like your dog was such a sweetheart that she immediately charmed the heck out of every single police officer who arrived on the scene, which probably alleviated some of that risk, and I'm sure that the Karen screeching inanely probably didn't do much to endear the cops to her either. Also, that kid has got to straighten things out. Throwing rocks at a crossbreed of 2 of the scariest breeds wasn't exactly a big brain move, although I guess he was doing it for street cred with his friends. Change course, kid. This way isn't going to work out well for you. Also, the author did post photos of the dog, and if you were still on the fence, I can nearly guarantee it would have changed your mind. What an absolute cutie and a sweetheart. Am I the jerk for expecting my adult daughter to pay back what she owes me? My daughter Aria, 21, abandoned us, her stepmother, young half-sister, and me, when she was 15 to go and live with my enabling ex-wife Sandra and her husband. Until then, we had 50-50 custody, but Sandra has always been less strict than me. She's always let Aria do what she wants and has never had any home rules. She also buys Aria everything she wants, so she'll want to live with her. Sandra lives in the same town where Aria's high school was, while I live 25 minutes away. So, one of my rules was that if she went to meet up with a friend there, meaning I had to drive her, The next time they met, it was her friend's turn to come here. If the friend's parents didn't want to drive the kid here, then Aria wasn't allowed to meet them again while she was with me. Everything was fine that way for years. The major fallout happened in her last year of high school. She was 15. She went on a trip to another country with her school and didn't bother to send more than a couple of texts when she was away for 5 days. So I decided to ground her because she had to learn respect and to show some love for her family. She insisted that she had sent messages to her mother, but her stepmother and I had barely heard from her. She's never had a lot of friends, but she had been invited to some popular girl's party. This was my punishment, not going to that party after forgetting about her family. She got upset and started calling her mother to come and pick her up, but it was illegal to get her if it was my week. Plus, she wanted to go to her mother's because Sandra would lift my punishment and let her go to the party. Her mother came by at the end of the week and I told Aria she didn't have to come back if she didn't want to. I waited, but I heard nothing from her again. Her sister kept asking me why she didn't come back to us, and I didn't know how to explain to her that she didn't love us and that she preferred staying with her mother, her parties, and her free-of-rules life. Over the years, we've communicated through lawyers because Sandra has zero intentions on helping me get my daughter back, as she finally has her to herself. They've been demanding that I pay for the child support even now that she's 21 years old. I have to pay for that and for half of her college expenses by law. When Aria turned 18, an adult, I started adding up everything I had to pay in an Excel that I send to Sandra when I update it, so she knows what damage she's doing to our daughter. I expect Aria to pay her debt, but I gave Sandra the option to pay for her, which she refused. We're now at $18,000. Aria's been trying to get in touch again. I told her that we can't fix the emotional part unless we fix the money part first. She needs to prove to me that she doesn't only care about the money. Sandra says I'm a jerk, but I think she is, since she's done nothing but try to take my daughter away, and she finally has what she wants. So, am I the jerk? What the hell? Am I missing something? What the actual crap is this author's deal? Sounds like his daughter was just kind of behaving like a normal teenage girl, and he's counting every dollar spent and social transaction to throw in everyone else's face for later. Also telling the other sister that Aria only doesn't want to be there because she, quote, doesn't love them? Cripes, it's just so skewed and manipulative. Good fricking luck trying to get the child support and stuff that you're legally obligated to pay back. Why on earth would any judge just rule that this kid should have to pay it? The author literally said that she could go and live with her mother if she wanted to, and seems furious that she took him up on it. Get effed, my dude. I hate when customers won't leave at store closing time. So I make a clever plan to get rid of them. I've worked in a supermarket for 10 years. You get your share of Karens, and the only thing you can do is smile politely. But what I hated even more after an 8-hour shift and having to close up the supermarket were the customers who came in 5 to 10 minutes before closing who just do their shopping like no one else wants to go home. There was a time that I was scheduled every Friday closing shift and pretty much every Saturday closing shift. The store closed at 8, we weren't open on Sundays back then. Also, on Saturday we had to take out all the cash drawers and manually count all the money. We could start doing this when all the customers had left and the front and back doors were locked. So, customers coming in 5 to 10 minutes before closing time and taking their sweet, sweet time to shop were hated. Hated with passion. My shop had a procedure. We'd barricade our entrance and turn our front door on only opening when people wanted to leave the store at about 5 minutes before closing. We'd remind customers at 2:45, 10, and 5 to closing time that the store was going to close and please go and pay for your groceries. Normally, we had very few incidents. This one, however, is burned in my memory. It was a Saturday. As head of the cashiers for that night, I had the honor to make or break the day of our beloved customers. I'd had to deal with my fair share of Karens, male and female, and I just wanted to go home. So I followed the procedure, asked one of my fellow money handlers to set the front door, and stayed there to handle any customer. At 2 minutes before closing time, a man comes running to the door. My colleague asks what he needs and reminds him that the store is going to close and he won't have much time. He says he just needs formula. Since I was busy with the customer, she let him in. Guy gets a basket and goes into the shop. Since he said he needed formula, we thought he'd be in and out like Roadrunner. Nope. No, because Formula Man didn't need formula. At 5 minutes past closing, he's seen at the cheese section of our store. 15 minutes passed at our wine section. What the frick does he need that for? What kind of baby does he have? Several of my colleagues have gone to this man to get him to the counter. He scoffs, huffs, and says that he's a paying customer. My fellow money handler was the last one to go to him, and that's when Formula Man went too far. He yelled at her, cussing at her, and making a high school student cry. Now, I'm teed off, so I do what I always do in these situations. I take off my store shirt, put out a neat jacket I keep in case of emergencies, and put it on. You see, when you have the store outfit, you are often seen as a lesser being. But behold, I change my outfit and suddenly I look like management, and my word is all-powerful. The real manager sees this happening, pops out a huge grin, and goes to the back to watch from the security cameras. So I don the magical outfit and I go to Formula Man. I tell him in no uncertain terms that the store has been closed for 15 minutes and he's been asked multiple times to go and pay for his things. He starts to huff and puff himself up like the big bad wolf. By the way, I'm a 5'2" woman and people think that they can intimidate me. I told him that he was only allowed entrance since he said he needed formula. So I gave him a choice. He could go now and pay for the things in his basket, or I would take the basket from him, grab the formula he claims to need so much, and he could pay for that. He could choose not to do either, and in that case, security would love to make his acquaintance. Either way, he'd leave now. I'd been working there for 6 years at that point and had done a lot of closing shifts. I thought this would be a kind and diplomatic way to solve a problem, as dragging them outside would not be so customer-friendly. And this guy, he tried, oh boy, he tried to threaten and intimidate me. He failed. He left with his cheese and wine and many threats to call corporate. The next week he came again. This time he encounters me at the door. What did he need? Formula. So I brought him to our service desk, went inside and bought out a single pack of every kind of formula we had. I asked him which one he needed. He didn't say a word and left. Don't mess with our closing times. No question of jerkiness could possibly be posed here. Pretending you need essential items to feed your hungry baby when you're really just stocking up for your wine and cheese night? Behavior fail, moral fail, and just all-around society fail. Screw Formula Man. I especially love how effective the author was at catching him at the door the next time he tried to pull this crap, and fetched him the exact item he said he was getting. No charcuterie for you, you Ken D-bag. The worst thing about him is that he's actually ruining things for people who do need essential items. Like, we have to trust that the people who say they're coming in for formula are actually doing this to feed a baby. And the fact that he had the nerve to chew out the employees who were gently pointing out that he was being a dink, to the point of making one of them cry? Like, sweet crap on a cracker, sir. How do you justify all of this to yourself? And the worst part of this is that you know that half the time when the employees enforce the closing times and kick these monsters out, not-so-great managers will side with the customer and punish them after the fact. In my old cafe, we actually set up a barricade of chairs in front of the door with the flipped close sign when we were cleaning down for the night. And people would be climbing over said barricade and asking if we could make them a latte. People are great until they become customers, aren't they? Entitled Dad has special permission. Where have we heard that before? I work at a virtual reality lab at a university library, where the students can come and unwind and play VR games for free. They can also develop and test their games on our system. However, due to the sensitive nature of financing for VR systems at the moment, we limit our VR users to 18 years or older, so our equipment is less accident-prone in the hands of younger users, and also so entitled parents don't sue us if their kids get hurt. That all makes sense, right? This policy is clearly detailed on our site and on a poster near our station. Some students have tried to bring their younger siblings or parents with their kids, and every time I have to say that we have a policy against it, but we're looking into waivers in the future. Most of them completely understand and will calmly leave without any harsh feelings. One day, as I was a new employee at the station, this was one of my first shifts alone without guidance from my supervisor. We didn't have many reservations for the evening. The one we did have, I recognized as a guy who came to our station frequently over the summer, so I didn't think much about it. When he arrives, he has his son in tow, who he's bought to watch before, but the kid usually sits with his Nintendo DS and plays quietly, to which I didn't acknowledge as he's been to the station before and he knew the rules. Seriously, this kid was an angel. He's always so happy whenever you see him, and he's so polite. Normally, I don't like kids, but this one was so hard not to like. I began setting up the headset for the dad's use. The dad says to the kid, "You ready to play, buddy?" The little guy is clearly dancing with excitement, and I have to walk up and say, "Excuse me, sir, we have a policy, no one under the age of 18. "What? No. I called in and asked earlier, and someone said it was okay. Do you know who?" I thought perhaps someone didn't tell me and he actually did have permission. "Did you get the name of the person you got permission from?" And the kid says, "It's okay, Daddy, you can just play and I'll watch." Dad says, "No, I was given special permission from the library. He can play today. I called and everything." He was clearly becoming agitated since I said his child couldn't play. So I gave my supervisor a quick text that explained the situation. However, there was no speedy reply, so I called my boss. When my boss picked up, I explained the situation to them as well. My boss told me to ask what number they called, and I relayed this question to the dad. He showed me a number from his call history, and I relayed the number to my boss. That number wasn't even related to any lines to the library, and my boss quickly said if he wanted his kid to play, he'd have to go to their boss, and told me where the dad could find them. I explained this to the dad and that he could still play and his kid could watch, but I gave him directions to where he could get the permission and he seemed okay with that answer. He began putting on the headset to use. Moments later, I hear, "The headset is blurry. Is there any way you can fix it?" This can happen because the lenses on the inside are beveled with your eyes. If not lined up correctly, it's a whole blurry mess. So I said, "If you pull the headset down a little more on your face so that it sits straight, it should look better. If not, try adjusting the pupil distance dial on the side for better vision." He completely ignored my first piece of advice, even though I could clearly see that the headset wasn't seated correctly. He begins fiddling with the dial and getting more worked up when it doesn't work. He played with it for about 10 minutes. It's now 30 minutes into his hour-long reservation. He takes it off and says to me, "Where did you say that I could go for that permission?" I kindly gave him the information as to what office and building he needed to go to. His reservation was the last slot available before we closed. He asked, "What time do you close?" I said, "Around 4 p.m. He picks up his kid and says, "Come on, buddy, we're going to see if we can get you this headset and pay Mr. Boss's boss a visit." He gives me a disgusted look like it was my fault that these were the rules and stalks off in the direction I pointed him in. Meanwhile, my supervisor finally texts me back saying that he was lying and he clearly knew the rules. Apparently, he'd tried to pull the same stunt over the summer with them, but got nowhere with it. They rushed out to see if I still needed help, but the entitled dad had already left and they apologized that it happened while I was alone on my shift. On the next shift, we got word from my boss's boss that this dude did make it there and argued that his child should be able to play. However, he was quickly shut down as we never grant these kinds of permissions to anyone, and we'd never heard anything else regarding the subject of what happened to him. He's never made another reservation at the station again. In short, an entitled dad tries to get special permission for his kid to use VR, but lies about it after he's found to clearly know the rules and pulled similar stunts before. Of course he was a repeat offender. The kind of perplexing thing is why he was so insistent that his kid be allowed when the child himself had clearly accepted these rules were in fact a thing. One day I dream of getting a VR headset, and to be completely honest, I'd be very wary of letting a kid below the age of 13 play on it. That seems like a great way to destroy one or both of the controllers, or maybe have the kid run crashing into a sturdy piece of furniture and ruin your relationship with the parents for a while. I kind of have to admire the gall on the dad for continuing with the lie and showing his non-existent call history to the library and just trying to claim that these calls were definitely to someone who had totally given him one-time specific permission that nobody else could get before that point in history. And of course, he had no capacity to listen to the technical instructions to fix the headset so that it actually worked properly. All of this after multiple visits, apparently. So let's recap. A man with no capacity to learn, no ability to follow instructions, limitless capacity to try the same thing over and over and expect different results, and the world's nicest kid? At least we can take solace that apparently you can be a nice guy no matter what genetic line you come from. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Entitled dad learns that the rules apply to everyone in the pool. So here's what happened. So I'm a guy who loves swimming, probably my favorite activity after kickboxing. I've always taken swimming a bit too seriously, every day trying to break my limit or record, 'cause practice makes perfect and I hate being interrupted in anything I do. I'm normally a pretty chill person and I don't often lose my cool. But please, for the love of God, don't tick me off. It usually doesn't go very well. It was my daily swim time, 8 p.m. every night after kickboxing. Everything was fine until I entered the pool, changed my clothes, put on my cap, took a little shower, and got into the pool. I chose my regular lane, which is the cornermost one, because no one usually takes that corner, and then I noticed this kid, about 7 or 8 years in the pool, making whale-like noises and splashing around in the water. The clubhouse rules are that kids below 13 need to get their butts out of the pool at 7:30 p.m. No exceptions. So that older kids or more mature people who want to swim can swim and not horse around. Basically meaning you can horse around till 7:30 p.m. irrelevant of age. I mean, it's whatever, I don't really care about a kid being in the pool as long as he's not being a pain to me. And I'm 17, just so you know. That's when I notice that this brat is deliberately getting in people's way who are in the middle of a lap, repeatedly. And again, I don't give a frick as long as it's not me. Selfish, I know, but I don't care. People tell him to get out of the way and he giggles and goes away. I began to take my third lap and the brat starts heading my way. And of course, I can't see because my head's in the water. And the last time I remembered, he was on the opposite lane of the pool from me, so here I am doing freestyle and trying to meet my goal for the day, and in comes the brat headbutting me in the water. I stagger and halt myself, choking on some water. Not fun. Still keeping my cool, I tell the brat to get off the lane I'm using. Mind you, the pool is empty-ish. It's a 6-lane pool, so 5 of these lanes were taken, including mine. He tells me to go to another lane. Dude, you're a kid. Behave like a kid. I start getting angry. For the second time, I tell him nicely, go to the lane you are in now. I'm guessing he sensed that crap might hit the fan for him if he pesters me anymore, so he swam to his father in the lane that was occupied. I didn't know his father was there. He was just chilling there, like, dude, what the frick, control your kid. People here are wishing you had used protection more, or at least would have just been a better father. All I hear are some murmurs and then the kid pointing toward me. I start heading to the initial point of my lane to restart, but then the entitled dad starts to waddle towards me with his kid. I knew something was up, so I didn't start my lap again because I knew I'd just be interrupted. Sorry for being a stereotypical guy here, but the entitled dad was a young, handsome, clean-shaven man, so naturally I assumed what he was going to say when he came up to me was, sorry for the inconvenience, I'll see that my child doesn't interrupt anyone again. But reality is often disappointing. This was in Hindi, so I'm translating very roughly. He said, what happened? Why did you scold my kid? I replied, well, I don't know whether you noticed, but your kid here is headbutting everyone in the pool for his own enjoyment. He can do whatever he wants. It's a public pool, you retard. Now I start losing my cool, and my volume increases a little for our conversation to become a show for everyone else. Just because it's a public pool doesn't mean you and your absolute trash son can do whatever you want. Do you even have a basic sense about how to behave in public and how to make your child understand what's wrong and what's right? Don't talk to me like that, you trash. Do you know who I am? I give absolutely zero fricks about who you are, and observing from your behavior, you must be nothing but scum who got everything handed to your butt by your parents. And as a matter of fact, the people here and the lifeguards were doing your kid a favor by even letting him be in the pool. This finally draws the attention of the lifeguards, who were finally done with the kid's crap and told the kid to get out of the pool. The father, getting more angry by the second, told him to go change and wait for him until he was done swimming. Obviously, the kid began to whine and said that, Dad, if I can't swim, then you can't either. My gosh, if looks could kill, I'd be dying for an eternity. The guy starts waddling out of the pool with his son still crying, giving me a deadly look, and what do? I take off my goggles, put a big smile on my face, and wink. And carry on swimming. That guy felt that from behind, I think, because he was fuming. So, what do you think? Am I kind of a jerk for this? Yeah, I can't see this flying for me at all when I was a kid. My dad would be grabbing me by the ear, apologizing profusely to everyone I'd knocked into, and steering me towards the cafe to wait until the rest of my siblings were done with their much less obnoxious and intrusive swim. Speaking from experience, by the way, I think in most pools, the lap pool at some point gets taken over by the more serious swimmers. And seriously, if the dad in this situation didn't realize that, then has he even been to a pool in his whole fricking life? I don't know if what the author was saying was true and that this was some kind of entitled class thing, and if it was, then that increases the jerkiness tenfold. If you're upper class, then maybe you should show some class, Dad. Revenge is a dish, best severed burnt. So full disclosure, I'm a pretty petty person and I'm also a smart aleck. I know that I'm a jerk in this story, but I think it was justified. So, I was a chef at a very nice restaurant. One of the top things on our menu is an A5 olive wagyu. In non-chef geek terms, it's an $800 steak. I get an order for 4 of them at a table. I cook all 4 of them the way they should be, which is served rare due to the nature of the steak. And I do that every time unless instructed otherwise. We use a special unit for cooking called a salamander. It cooks our steak at 900 degrees Fahrenheit, so we only put it in 30 seconds per side. One of my waiters comes up to me in tears saying that table wanted me. So I leave the kitchen and put on my customer service face, and before I can even walk up and ask if there's a problem, some lady barks at me, it's raw. I apologize and ask if she'd like me to cook it more. She says she wants it done for another 10 minutes. I try to explain that it would be incinerated, but she barks at me. You heard what I said, go do it! I was tired of this bullcrap, so I just smiled and said no problem. I took it back and tossed it in the back for 10 minutes. It honestly hurt my soul to ruin such a good steak, but it's what she asked for. So when I take it out, it literally fell apart into ash. I personally brought it to her with a huge smile on my face. She asks what the hell is this, that she didn't want this, and I cut her off and I said, I heard what you wanted and I did it. For those asking, she had to pay, which she reluctantly did. My manager and boss were very chill about it and even laughed after she had left, and at my restaurant, 20% tip is required and incorporated into every check, and thankfully the other 3 people were cool and they even apologized, which made me happy. I assume it was a business meeting based on what they were talking about and how they were dressed. More delightful hospitality revenge. You see, evidently, this restaurant was at a certain level of reputation. At that point, although it's an oppressively high-pressure environment, you're at the whim of the chefs, because they have demand out the wazoo, and as far as they're concerned, you're lucky to be able to get a place there. And since you've enjoyed the service, you have to pay or get the cops called on you. You made the order screw-ups, so you have to live with it. I love this. This is the definition of malicious compliance, but also, from the way her co-diners apologized, we can be sure that she was unbearable in a whole bunch of situations like this. No hard feelings from the others, clearly. Also, I think the title of the story was meant to be Revenge is a dish best served burnt, but the author wrote severed, so I left it in. They say at the beginning of the story that they're a smart aleck, so hopefully they appreciate this. My Tinder date tells me he's going to R-word me. So I publicly share all of his messages to his workplace. Bear with me as this might get long. My revenge came in 2 parts, one petty and one pro, and a warning that some of the individual in question's threats get pretty graphic. The backstory. When I was 19 or 20, I'm 25 now, I met a guy on Tinder. Let's just call him Brad. Brad and I didn't get off to a great start, but I had no idea how bad it was going to get. At first, it just seemed like we were incompatible, as he was pushy and rude and I take no crap from anyone. If it had stopped there, I wouldn't be here right now, but it didn't stop there. Once I made clear that I found Brad repulsive and wanted nothing more to do with him, his messages took a turn. He threatened to stalk, do the unspeakable act, kidnap and dispose of me, along with some gory details about gouging out my eyes and stuff he'd do to my body. Particularly disturbing was his explicit desire to, quote, strangle me and watch the life leave my eyes. He also managed to find my home address 3 hours away from the city we were in, and threatened to come find me. As a side note, it was my dad's house, and some small part of me wanted to see exactly how badly it would turn out for him if he showed up there. Of course, I warned my dad and gave him a picture of the guy. I also took screenshots of everything he sent to me. Okay, so the petty revenge. Being a young woman with no idea whether this madman would actually go to lengths to find me, I called the cops. When they came, they looked at the messages, told me it constituted terroristic threats, but also told me there wasn't much they could do unless Brad actually showed up. They did take down his details, including where he worked, which is listed in his bio. This will be important later. From what I understand, the cops went to Brad's workplace to speak to him, and he refused, so they left. Nothing ever came of it. I could barely get them to call me back, much less get actual answers. It was a serious bummer, especially back when it was fresh and I was genuinely terrified. For the second part of the petty, I found his Facebook. Again, don't put your freaking workplace on all of your social media. And I snooped around and managed to find a couple of his family members. I sent them all the screenshots along with an explanation of what happened. I didn't hear back for a few days, but when I did, it was from Brad's mum. She apologized profusely on behalf of her son and told me that they were driving from Brad's hometown 3 states away to confront him. She asked me not to warn him of this in advance, and obviously I agreed. I don't know what became of this, but I hope he got a good Southern-style butt-whooping. Now for the pro-level revenge. A few years later, when Brad probably thought he was in the clear, something jogged my memory of what he did, and I decided it was time for him to face some actual consequences. I made a Facebook post including his picture and bio, all of the screenshots, and a message warning people in our area and asking them to share it around so other women would know who they were dealing with. 2 days later, Facebook took it down, but the damage had already been done. 3,000 shares and many messages later, and all of that information had made its way to his company's Facebook page. From what I understand, they were absolutely flooded with messages about Brad and his behavior. They responded with a stock message about how they were dealing with it according to their policies. This was disheartening, as I assumed they were just going to blow it off. By this point, Brad had been working with them for at least 4 years. However, I soon learned that this was not the case. Several women from his company messaged me to thank me for coming forward and exposing the kind of person they were working with. It was through one of these women that I found out what happened to good old Brad. He was called into a meeting with his boss, HR, and CEO of the company. As a side note, this is a multinational company, and the CEO is a woman. They didn't take the situation lightly. Within 2 days of posting on Facebook, Brad had been fired and escorted off the premises by armed security. In the end, Brad got what he deserved, and now he has a massive blank spot on his resume, as this company was his first job out of college, and he can no longer get a letter of recommendation from them. As far as what became of him, I don't know. I never heard from him again, although I did get a message from his grandma telling me that what I was doing was illegal. I've moved cities since then, and he has no idea where I am, so I feel pretty safe. If he did show up, I'm in a state where you can legally light someone up just for trespassing on your property. It would be a massive mistake on his part to show up. In short, a man threatens me with some truly graphic and horrific stuff on a dating app. I inform the cops and his parents, and a few years later I get him fired from his job, leaving a huge blank space on his resume that will be hard to explain. Yuck. Well, I guess there is the vague hint of a possibility that maybe Brad had changed in his years between the offense and his firing. I can see why it wasn't a good look for them. Regardless, if they fired him based on the truth of what he did, then it was justified. I'm a little bummed that we didn't get any feedback on the family confrontation that must have gone down between his family and Brad. How do you look your mum in the eye when that sort of evidence is brought up? Although evidently his grandma must have been more than okay with it, given that she decided to come after the author for posting it on social media. You know what, folks? I understand that we all do dumb things when we're young, but these two were in their 20s, and I think the line on things that people will still judge you on years later in life is probably drawn well short of threatening someone with the unspeakable act and their graphic murder if they refuse to do the deed with you. The time of this puts it at a few years after the Me Too era as well, so he definitely should have been more than aware that this kind of stuff was increasingly less likely to be tolerated. So at least his own self-instinct should have stepped in to protect him, even if it seems like he was a crappy enough person that basic morals weren't going to get in the way. Be better than Brad. It's not hard. My child deserves an A, even though they have no comprehension of your class material. I'm a teacher and I've worked in the private system. This entitled parent story takes the cake of my experiences. It was about 2 years ago. The child, Cece, was a student in my geometry class. I gave a simple quiz the first or second week of school to give students a feel for how my quizzes and tests work and how I expect them to study. I also gave them a study guide of sample problems that was similar to the quiz, and they could look up the answers I posted on the student portal. One question in particular was word for word and number for number the exact same question that would appear on the quiz. I do this to cover my own butt against entitled parents who claim I'm being too hard, and I'm really trying not to be. CC naturally doesn't study and gets an okay grade, but definitely lower than the average, probably C range. Again, this was an easy intro quiz. I know she didn't study because the exact question was one of the ones she got wrong, and she admitted she didn't study to her friends when I was going over the quiz the next day. I told the students they could correct the quiz to bump it up a letter grade, and I thought everyone left happy enough with that. Right? Wrong. That evening, I get a call from the entitled mother and entitled dad. They are not happy with CC's grades or the fact that CC can make corrections to up the grade. They set up a meeting, and I'm puzzled, but I go ahead. Mom and Dad arrived at the meeting clearly annoyed. I show them the study guide, the quiz, everything highlighted to show how the questions match up, and the exact same question appears on both. This is normally when most parents realize that I've done nothing wrong and drop the argument, but not these two. Entitled Mum says, "Well, CC is a good girl. She deserves an A." I said, well, this math quiz isn't about how good CC is. It's whether or not she comprehends the material. This shows she doesn't. It's clear she didn't study, and she has an opportunity to make the grade a bit higher now. Besides, this is a short intro quiz. It won't count for much in the long run. Dad says, "But CC plays sports. How can you expect her to study and get an A? You should just give it to her. You're being completely unfair." I'm sorry, but extracurricular activities are a choice. CC needs to balance her schedule. This quiz was 10 questions. The review sheet took most of my students about half an hour. They had it for 2 days before the quiz. And again, CC can make up her grade by correcting the quiz. "But CC is a good girl. Why can't you just change her grade to an A?" I'm not changing the grade until CC proves she understands the material by correcting the quiz, and then I will bump up her quiz by 1 letter grade, the same as I do for all my students. We donate quite a lot to this school. CC should be getting all A's. At this point, the principal supervising our meeting stepped in and had to explain to them they pay for quality of education and not grades. They left rather upset, and I didn't hear from them again. CC, to her credit, was very sweet and apologized for her parents' terrible behavior and admitted she knew she didn't study and could do better. She tried very hard for the rest of the year and came to extra help sessions, and I think she ended the year with a B-. Math wasn't her strongest subject. Thankfully, I never heard from entitled Mum or Dad about CC's grades again. In short, Mum and Dad are furious that their daughter didn't get all A's and still saw private school as a way to pay for CC to get straight A's. Yet again, I'm gobsmacked by the blatantness of the parents' idea of how this should work. If you're going to try and do that, you have to at least word it in a way that isn't outright blackmail. Like, "Oh dear, I suppose if our daughter isn't thriving here, we'll have to move her and our donations to a spot where she can thrive." I mean, I'll admit that wasn't exactly brilliant, but it sure as all heck is better than just outright saying, "We donate and therefore she should get bumped up by 2 whole letter grades with no work." Like, guys, if you're gonna be corrupt, do it right. Jokes aside, I don't know what you can say to people like this. I'm just glad that not all places seem to mindlessly cater to goons like these based off their fabulous wealth. I'm sure that there's a couple of schools that will let kids get away with actual murder if the particular child's parents are drawing in the purse strings on a massive regular donation. Also, getting an entire letter grade bump for correcting a test is madness to begin with. That's a huge sweet deal, and if I had something like that in university, I would have been a straight A student. This teacher was really lenient and chill and was putting in great work to actually prepare her kids. I don't know what more she could do to help, to be honest. Also, cred to CC for being a nice kid despite her parents. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Entitled woman tries to steal from my mum. Once, long, long ago, in a time when my age started with a 1, I worked at a service desk in a large family-run grocery store that was in 4 different states. At that time, the rules are different to what they are now. With permission, one could cash a personal check for $100 without needing to buy anything. So, on a busy weekend day, I'm busy at work and my poor mum comes up to the desk just crying. Her purse was taken from the grocery cart. I call security and one of my managers. Down comes our biggest security guard. Mum only came up to his lower chest height. There was over a foot of difference in height. He, as calm as a kitten, gets Mum calmed down, taking her upstairs to look over the cameras and call the local city PD. I'm still working, distracted, and my boss is staying nearby because he knows I'll bolt to my mum's side if I'm given the chance. And that's when she comes up to the desk. In her cart is a very familiar-looking purse. Hooked to the strap is a keychain with a very familiar face on a sports picture. Immediately, I can feel a twitch start. She laughs at all the action that was taking place. How silly little old people can get. It's just a purse. I want to smack her. But I laugh instead while subtly trying to get my boss's attention, loudly asking what she needs and rubbing at one of my ears as if an explanation as to why I'm talking so loud. During this year, ear infections were going around schools and causing hearing loss. The lady pulls out a checkbook cover, which if she had flipped it over, she would have seen two familiar-looking people on the custom cover. She explains that she needs gas and cigarettes and didn't want to have to write 2 checks. So could she please get $100? Now, gas prices during this time sometimes dipped beneath $1, and cigs were less than $4, so why would she need $100? I, however, say I need to ask for approval since we were limiting check cashing limits. The lady just nods and proceeds to write out the check and falters when signing her name. Damn, that twitch I was getting. So I call the security office and play off that I was calling my boss for approval. Our mountain of a man security guy clues in quickly and tells me to stall as cops are on the way. So I happily tell the lady that yes, I can cash her check, but sadly I can only do $50. Lady gives one of those forced laugh smiles and says she needs to rewrite the check. Ripping both the check and carbon out, I hold out my hand and point out that we have a shredder so I can keep her account number safe from the voided check. She hands over the ripped out check. It doesn't take long. She's struggling through the spelling of our last name and makes a newly married joke. I just force smile and nod my head. She pulls out a store ID card from the checkbook and hands them to me. Humming, I start to run the check and put it in such a way that I know the machine will jam. In the meantime, the security guard comes down and out of the corner of my eyes I catch a flash of silver hair with my mum standing behind him. He moves to keep her out of sight from this lady. Proclaiming myself having a rotten day, I have to carefully extract the jammed check from the register. I apologize profusely to the woman and step from the front desk to the back to get cash for the check, saying that the cash office manager will have to look at the check to see if we can use it or if sadly we'll need a third one written. This lady is looking a bit miffed, but I have a feeling she knows if she makes any of a fuss, we won't cash a check for her at all. As it was, we were already doing this as a favor because our check cashing funds are at a low. That's when I hear them. It's the boys in blue asking for her to step to the side. She, after failing to attempt to explain herself out of trouble, finally exclaims how the heck did I know the check didn't belong to her. Reaching forward, I flip the keychain to face her and she finally looks at it and then at me. The picture might have been a year old, but darn it if I still haven't changed since high school. Her eyes get wide as I say, because the purse and contents are my mum's. Mum got her purse back, lady was carted away since she also attempted fraud and attempted check cashing. Mum did go to the trial, but I can't remember what happened and I'd need a medium to ask my mum about it. In short, a lady steals a purse and tries to cash a check with the daughter of the purse owner. It ends badly for this lady. Well done for catching this woman. I don't know if she was desperate or something, but she seemed like a real smooth criminal for coming up and having the gall to pass off the upset woman she had robbed as being a silly old thing and trying to cash the check moments after the theft while the victim was still in the store. In fact, I don't know if this lady set out to steal that day. This seems really spontaneous and like a crime of opportunity, regardless of how smooth she was. It's one of those heists that's actually a B+ on execution, even if it was an F on planning. Seriously, it probably would have worked if she hadn't gotten the daughter of the person she stole from as a cashier. Alright, so I've gone out of my way to credit this woman's skills. So the verdict? What a jerk! Stealing the purse of an old lady, back in the day when we didn't have phones and that particular bag would have contained basically everything that the lady would have needed in her day-to-day life. Not cool. Understatement of the decade, I guess. Good job for catching her.
You obviously don't need it, and he needs it for his test.
So this happened last week when I was on my way to work. For background, I'm in a D&D group that meets every Sunday and Tuesday night, and I have a bit of a knack for losing track of time and just not sleeping on those nights. So when I get ready for work, I stop at a gas station on the way and grab an energy drink and a breakfast sandwich. Because if I don't, I'm absolutely dead for the day, and I can't deal with the crappy people I work with and for. I'm also a bit of a chubby 20-something girl who doesn't really wear makeup. Basically a nice way of saying that I look a few shades better than that extra on The Walking Dead, but only because I'm not missing bits of skin. Anyway, I'm getting my sandwich and some gas for my car, and lucky me, I grab the last NOS in my favorite flavor. Cherry. It's the best. I then go over to the breakfast sandwich as the most Karen-y of Karens and her mid-teens failure of birth control come in together. She's getting a coffee and donuts, and her spawn is over by the energy drinks. He begins whining about there not being any on the shelf as I grabbed my stuff and put it on the counter to be rung up. That's when the little brat sees that I have my drink and begins complaining, and lucky me, that brings Karen's attention my way. "Hi," she said, obviously trying to push herself ahead of me in the line. "Can my son have that?" My dead stare, although a suitable response, was rude, so I shook my head and said a tired, "No, I just brought it. They may have some in the back though." And she took offense to that and started mouthing off about how I should get one of those ones in the back then. After all, her son had a test and they were in a hurry and didn't want to be late. "Then you should probably ask now so he's not late. I brought this one and I'm going to be late for work." She narrowed her eyes before continuing to ask and demand that I hand it over despite having already paid. I'd also like to point out that the cashier at this point recognized me and knew that I get a bit testy when I'm tired and non-caffeinated. I asked, "Hey, how many do you have in the back?" The mum made a bit of a smug face at this point, but I cracked open my can, which made her gasp and glare. We have a case left in the back." I said, "I'll take it. Mind if I pick it up after work?" It was about $40 with the 2 for $3 promotion they had going. I paid as she screamed about how that wasn't fair and how I have enough caffeine to last me a month. So F you, Karen, no one gets between me and my caffeine. Look, if you ask stupid questions, you're going to get stupid results. Take that, Karen, and, Karen's teenage kid? Well, sucks that you have that as your mother. Learn from her mistakes, kid. That kind of behavior is only going to set you behind in life and leave you exhausted and drowsy during life's literal and figurative tests. Now, you have all the information you need to not grow up to be a Ken. Also, I love the author's vibe. She went in on her regular routine, just hoping to get a bit of caffeine after a night of playing D&D, but did not shy away when she found herself on the path of violence. She joined battle and came out well and truly the victor, and with all the caffeination she'd need for her post-role-playing mornings from hell in the future. Great job, author. My roommates refuse to lock the door, so I take everything to teach them a lesson. So this was a few years ago during my freshman year in college. I'd worked hard in high school to save up enough cash to buy 2 TVs, a PlayStation 4, speakers, kitchen utensils and plates, a futon, and a few other smaller items. The college I went to had suite-style living, where each roommate got his own individual room. There were 4 of us, so we had 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms, a small kitchen, and a big main room, which I call the Great Room. Since I was the first one who moved in, I got unpacked and settled in, making sure to leave plenty of room for everyone to unpack and claim space in the bathrooms and other common areas. I set up one TV, the larger one, in the Great Room with my PlayStation 4, so we could all enjoy it, and I put all of my utensils and plates in the kitchen so we could use those as well. I didn't mind sharing my stuff up to this point since I liked to share and I put my faith in others. However, I wouldn't be posting here if this trusting nature of mine hadn't been changed. On to the story. One night, a drunk college kid came barging into our room, screaming at the top of his lungs and waking me up. I was about to get out of bed until one roommate, the slob of the group, ran out and kicked this guy into the hallway. Since I left a lot of expensive items in the great room for us to use, this made me fear that anyone could walk in and steal my stuff, and that would be the last I'd see of them. So I asked my roommates to just lock the door if no one else was home, and we agreed on it. This worked for a few days until I noticed I walked in and no one was home, but the door wasn't locked. Granted, they'd go to a few friends' dorms across the hall, but they'd gone out for almost 5 hours. I asked everyone again, but they blew me off. A 1-to-3 vote doesn't work too well at the college I attend as far as roommate agreements went, so there was nothing I could do. Anyway, there were 3 more instances of dumb young freshmen walking into our dorm and either yelling or passing out on our couch with just the TV on and nothing on it. The straw that broke the camel's back was when I noticed my dishes I was sharing were in the trash, along with some stainless steel utensils. As I looked around, I also saw one of the 4 controllers I had was smashed and under the couch, and my remote was totally lost. Never knew what happened to it after all these years. I finally asked them once more to lock the door and to try and respect my things I shared with them, but they all blew me off and said, "It's not like you use them, it's basically ours anyway." With this, I got petty, and I mean petty. I started my revenge when they went off to get beer, since they wanted to play a new Call of Duty game. I can't remember what the title was. I first started with moving my TV and PlayStation 4 into my room, along with everything else I had out there, as well as my futon, which we used as a second couch. It took me about 30 minutes of hard labor, but I finally had a packed dorm room, and man, it looked awesome. But that's my petty part, now time for the revenge. After another 20 minutes, they returned with a whole group in tow, and they were stoked to play the new Call of Duty, until they noticed the entire great room was empty, save for the couch and a TV stand. I'd decided to leave before they got back, but I was receiving calls and texts for almost an hour, asking where I was and where all my stuff went. I decided to keep quiet and allow them to embarrass themselves in front of their friends. Not only that, but they confronted me on a few occasions to get me to surrender my items, or else they'd have to pay for new ones out of pocket. None of them worked, and they all sponged off all the snacks I brought for myself, which were now safe under my bed. I merely said, "Oh, sorry," but they're now locked behind my door, since that's the only door that's locked in this whole place. I told you, I won't share if it isn't behind a locked room, but now it is. They were very unhappy and spent way more than I did on my items, since I got go-back-to-school sales and work discounts on all of my items. I probably paid nearly $1,400 on everything I brought, and they paid nearly $2,100 to get back everything I'd shared, and then they had to split it all up at the end of the school year. I can say one thing for certain, it's fun to see 3 guys fight over a PlayStation 4 and a large TV, since they all chipped in to pay for them 3 ways. Anyways, that's my petty revenge and first online story. I hope you enjoyed listening. I've seen a lot of you saying I should have played dumb when they were asking me about my stuff disappearing, which they honestly thought they were entitled to anyway. I was pretty quiet as a freshman, and I used to hate confrontation. And one roommate was a bit of a thug with some thug-like friends, and I honestly had no intention of getting involved with that. But they were indeed moochers, and I have a plethora of stories about them, not revenge, but more how they left the place, and how I was more like a housekeeper than a roommate to them, since I hate dirty rooms, and I'm a little bit of a neat freak, I know. So, was I a jerk for what I did? Did I go too far? No, this is excellent revenge, and I think that all of us who've ever had a terrible flatmate are just full of envy for your ultimate victory in this one. Although I will say that I never quite had ones that were bald-faced about saying they were entitled to the use of all my stuff. Just ones who used it and then mumbled or gave silence once they were confronted. And it sounds like you went from being a charitable, if frustrated soul, to having one of the most decked-out rooms in anyone's wildest dreams. I also just have to call you out on the sheer luxury of your student living. 2 bathrooms between 4 people? That's insanity for student living. I'd say that we had at least double the amount of people per loo in every country I've ever lived in. But back to our main point, I'm not sure anyone who called you a jerk would have much of a leg to stand on. As you point out, if anything, you took their crap for a bit too long. Don't we all know someone who'd flip out at the first stolen snack? To say nothing of someone shattering their expensive Sony controller. And 1 break-in is a teachable lesson, 2 is a refresher, Anything else and it's complete gross negligence. No one could blame you, and I hope you enjoyed what sounds like the most luxurious student room of all time with your PlayStation 4 and big TV. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Try to freeze out my family? Well, why don't you join us? All of this happened when I was a baby, so this story has been relayed by my mum and dad. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. It was January of 1986. Between my mum and dad, there were 3 children, all girls. My eldest sister was 4, my middle sister was 3, and I was about 6 months old. We were all living in Tennessee, and we were struggling financially, with my dad making about $5 an hour doing factory work and my mum waitressing. I know that people can raise a family on this, but this was a town of about 400 people in rural Tennessee, so money was tight. My dad was approached by my paternal grandfather who was living with his new wife in Central California. For the sake of the story, we'll call her M. My grandfather invited my dad to come live with him and M for a while and told him he could get a job as a mechanic with the trucking company that Grandpa worked for. The big 16-wheelers were the kind he drove. He said the job paid $10, which doesn't sound like a great deal today, but in 1986, that was everything. My dad was a former Army sergeant who didn't receive a pension, but he did receive schooling to be a telecommunications engineer. There just wasn't a great need for them at the moment, and he was also a certified mechanic. My dad wanted to create a better world for his girls, so after cajoling my mum into accepting, as she wasn't keen at first, they packed up the car, said goodbye to his family, and made the trek to California. So to summarize before I go into details, the move was a bad idea. There ended up being no mechanic job, so my dad started work as a clerk in a gas station, and my mum stayed at home with Em and us girls. Em was nice at first, but then she started to get real nasty. My older sisters are from my mother's first marriage, and Em saw them as unwanted baggage. She'd snap at them for playing too loudly and having the light on too much. Keep in mind, they're toddlers. Apparently she was sweet to me because I was actually my father's blood and therefore was acceptable. After about a month of this, my mum told my dad it was time to leave because no one was going to treat any of her children like this. My father loves both of my sisters and agreed, but said they needed to save money to move back to Tennessee. Tax season was right around the corner, so my mum agreed that once the tax check arrived, they'd be out of there. Now, what you've all been waiting for. Remember when I said Em was stingy with the lights? She was also stingy with the heat. And let me tell you guys something, January in Central California gets cold. Because we all shared a room, my dad and mum would sleep in a full-sized bed. My sisters slept in sleeping bags on the floor, and I slept in a playpen that doubled as a crib. Em refused to turn on the heat, so sometimes we all squished together on the bed just for warmth. My mum and dad begged Em to turn on the heat for the sake of us girls, and she flat out refused. After a few nights of this, my dad had had enough. So here came the revenge. Remember when I said my dad was a telecom engineer? He was also very handy and crafty. A jack of all trades and a master of none, as he says. Em combated the cold with an electric heated blanket. That day, while Em was out, my dad went into the heated element, removed the plastic casing, carefully disconnected a few wires, placed the casing back on, and put the blanket back. It looked as it was before. That night, Em couldn't get the blanket to work and the heat was on in the house. My sisters were warm and Dad didn't have to share a bed with 3 squirmy girls. I know it doesn't sound like much, but Em was just awful and my dad didn't mind taking her down a peg without her knowing. We ended up leaving a few weeks for Florida where my dad got a job with a cable company where he could finally put his hard-earned skills to work. In short, step-grandmother refuses to turn on the heat, so my dad made her by rendering her heated blanket useless. So, some updates and questions that I'm getting. 1. What happened to that mechanic job? There was no job to begin with, apparently. When my grandfather was passing through on one of his work trips, he told my dad about this job and how much happier we'd be in California. When they asked why he lied, he said he wanted to stick it to my paternal grandmother and great-grandmother. like, I'm taking your son away. My dad is my grandmother's firstborn, so he's very dear to her, and my grandfather knew that. Question 2. Where was your grandfather when M was treating your sisters so poorly? My grandfather was gone a lot for work. If I were married to M, I'd be gone a lot too. Plus, he had a serious substance problem, painkillers, and he was constantly visiting, shall we say, certain ladies of the night. 3. Why did M treat you so differently than your sisters if you're not biologically related? That is a good frickin' question that we have no clue about. Seriously, no idea. My mum told me she kept trying to call herself Granny around us, which my mother put a hard stop to. It sounds harmless, but M was actually trying to replace my grandmother in our hearts. I already had a granny and she's in Tennessee, frick you very much. 4. How do your parents feel about this memory? My mum called it a dark time in her memories as a young mother. When my mum had finally had it with M treating my sisters like crap, she actually sent my sisters to live with their father in Florida for the short term. She said it was one of the hardest things she had to do. This is why we went to Florida instead of Tennessee when we left California. We were only separated for 2 weeks, thankfully. My dad definitely feels guilty when he thinks about what my mother went through with M. When my sisters left, he put himself into overdrive, picking up extra shifts at the gas station and doing odd jobs just to get us out of there. He was averaging 2 hours of sleep a night at this time. When M realized we were serious about leaving, she suggested that my parents leave me with them so they could get the house ready. My mother told her exactly where to go with that crap. 5. Do your sisters remember that time? Thankfully, no. They were really young, and my parents would have shielded us pretty firmly. 6. Are you still in contact with M and your grandfather? No. After we left, we never spoke to them again. My grandfather died when I was 9, and he was and is not missed. I'm pretty certain the big man downstairs rolled out the red carpet just for him. He was not a good guy. I saw M on Facebook a long time ago, but I haven't spoken to her and haven't had the urge to either. If I did, I don't think I could hold back, and she's just not worth the stress. Thanks for reading, everyone. Please remember to always be kind, except to M's. Because frick M. Yes, indeed. Screw M. What a truly crappy attitude. I'm warm and that's literally all that matters in this household. Good lord, if you can't stay warm without an electric element strapped to your body, what does it say about you that you're willing to just let everyone else sit around in an unheated house? I kind of have to wonder whether once she got another electric blanket, whether the heat in the house would have gone off again. Whether she'd have learned any sympathy from the experience? I mean, who are we kidding? Probably not. Okay, I'm warm again. Have fun freezing, everyone else. And the preferential treatment for her own, quote, flesh and blood is just equally awful. They're kids. They don't deserve your bile and neglect any more than their siblings. And while a lot of it can be placed at her feet, I think this is largely because she was the member of that terrible couple that the family were forced to live with. Paternal grandpa is just an absolutely awful guy based on what you've told us. Uproot a poor and struggling family into a situation where they can't support themselves, sheerly despite your own wife, and then just disappear from the situation while you get your fix of pills and working girls? What a garbage human being. Look, even if M is terrible, she was kind of forced into the shared living as much as anyone else was, and probably would have been equally happy for them not to be living there. Grandpops just did something to make someone else he hated angry, completely uncaring that he was playing with 5 other innocent people's lives and livelihoods into the bargain. Just a complete sack of crap.
Who authorized you to be closed on Christmas Eve?
So this happened back in 2016 in my first job, which I quit last year after Easter. This was due to the fact that I found it was more important I be there for my family since my job was interfering with my ability to support my family emotionally. I worked in a grocery store chain here in New England, and it was meant to be temporary. I ended up working 1.5 to 2 years as I wanted to have experience. My first Christmas Eve there is when this story took place. Being fresh meat at the store and having only worked for a month, I was still peppy and happy to be employed. I felt grown up and ready to go. Scheduled for a shift I can't remember how long, I was due to leave at 6 p.m. At the store, we closed at 6:30 for holidays, and managers would have to stand outside the doors so no one else would come in. It was that bad for last-minute shoppers. I had a line of about 3 people left, and it was 10 minutes before I had to leave. I also don't drive and it was snowing, and my mum or step-parent picked me up. So I wanted to hurry as it was also Christmas Eve and my family has traditions to do. But two of these people had full carts and I ended up going over my shift. My manager saw this and said for me to give my sign to a customer so they could help with my closing. And that's where our villain comes in. She's an older woman who I'm guessing was a grandmother and wanted to leave. I went to give her my sign. "Excuse me, ma'am."
I've been waiting here for 10 minutes. What are you doing?
"Oh, I'm still going to ring you up, don't worry." I smile, but she frowns and looks as if she's been sucking lemons for an hour. I was finishing up with the customer in front of her when the entitled woman slams her items on the conveyor belt. That took me off guard. Had I done something wrong? Oh, apparently I had. When she came up to my register while I started scanning her items, I didn't even have a chance to say the standard, "Do you have your store card?" when she snaps at me.
Who told you you could close?
"Oh, my manager, ma'am. You see, it's almost closing time and I was supposed to get off almost half an hour ago."
Where is he? I want to speak to your manager. I have a lot of things to say to him about this.
"I'm sorry, ma'am. I was only handing you my sign to put up so no one else would come in. I'm still going to ring you up."
I want to speak to your manager.
That's when my awesome coworker steps in. She was helping bag for me as I needed to get home fast. "Ma'am, she was meant to get off 20 minutes ago. We give customers our signs if we're going over and the manager closed her. This isn't her fault. Now would you like paper or plastic?" And this shuts the woman up. I'm guessing since I just turned 18 in October and was young, she didn't listen to me. But she huffed and puffed the entire transaction. When she left, I gave my awesome coworker a hug and thanked her almost in tears. I'm a sensitive person and have anxiety and depression on top of PTSD. People yelling at me can cause triggers or anxiety attacks. She was my hero that night and I got home safe and sound. But ever since that night, whenever that woman came back in, I had shots of anxiety and I prayed I wasn't going to ring her up. Thankfully, I haven't seen her since I quit, so I guess it's a semi-happy ending. Yeah, it really sucks to live in fear of your customers. I know what it's like to see that one person looming in through the door and just thinking, "No, please God, not me, don't talk to me again." It's hard to work out exactly what this woman was so angry about. She's still going to get her order in the exact same amount of time. Is she just so affronted at the nerve of having the author talking to her? Perhaps the author's right and she just flat out isn't listening and just assumed that the cashier wasn't serving her in spite of, the fact that they're literally saying they'll process her order. It's such a weird case of this not having to be as difficult as it was made to be. I do feel quite sad for the author. Customer service isn't a great environment for anyone who can be wrecked by confrontation in the way that they seem to be prone to because of some of their difficulties. And I'm sure that there were many more harrowing encounters to come for them. Good thing that they have the staunch co-workers and apparently managers who are prepared to stand at the door and stop customers from coming into the store. Is that normal in supermarket work? I feel like I've never seen that before. Anyway, fair call. We all know that people would run in and claim they just need 5 minutes otherwise and hold everyone up for another half hour. Entitled family throws away their puppy and says it's fine because he's just a dog. So, this happened 7 years ago. I used to volunteer at an animal shelter when I was in high school. Where I'm from, shelters overflow and the adoption coordinators take in and give away dogs with just a signature, no questions asked. And just to add, I love dogs more than life itself. This is especially why this story still makes me rage. Scotty was a big black lab, a 7-year-old gentle giant. All he'd ever want from anyone would be a few pets, maybe a belly rub. I met him, the best dog I ever knew, in the worst circumstance possible. He was being abandoned by his family. Enter the worst people I've ever met. The mum, aged 40, almost tearfully claimed that there was no way they could keep Scotty anymore. Her fiancé, in his late 40s, had just gotten a job in Australia and the family had to relocate. They had no financial means to take the dog. I was just a volunteer, so I saw as the shelter manager sighed as she processed him into the shelter. The dog had no idea what was happening to him, he just wagged his tail. The entitled family dropped him inside and, suspiciously, without a tearful goodbye, left him at the door. Now, the shelters in my country are not like those you have in the West. They're basically a free-for-all, a big area in which dogs are just tied. Some of them roam loose. It's an absolute hell, so we try to love the dogs enough to make up for the lack of infrastructure. Now, back to Scotty. It's been 2 days and he wouldn't budge from the spot that his, quote, family had left him. He'd hear footsteps and wag his tail just to be disappointed. He wouldn't eat. He was the saddest dog I'd ever seen. I'd sit next to him and he'd just put his head on my lap and sigh. I couldn't bear it. I took him home. It took him 2 weeks to become happy from depressed. He also had a ton of medical issues. His liver was giving out. I wondered why his ex-family hadn't told us he was this unwell. One day the shelter got a call. It was the entitled family asking if they could visit Scotty. Red flag number 1. They'd said they had to urgently relocate, didn't they? Why hadn't they left yet? I told them politely that Scotty needs some time to get used to his new house. The mum told me that the entitled kid, 10, had been crying for him and wanted to see him. So I agreed. They came to my house to meet him. Scotty was ecstatic. He was almost ready to leave with the kid. What was funny to me was that the entitled mum and fiancé sat in the car while the kid went to pet him and take pictures with him on his phone. He didn't seem emotional and spent about 10 minutes with the dog. This happened 2 or 3 times until I decided it was taking a bit too much of a toll on Scotty. Every time they left, it started all over again. Scotty was sad and depressed and wouldn't eat. I promised myself I'd let him forget those people. They'd now started calling me every other week and I asked them when they were going to Australia. And this has been translated into English, so please bear with me. So when are you guys leaving though? That's none of your business. Well, Scotty's well-being and emotional state is my business, so I can't let you guys meet him again. He doesn't eat for a week after you guys leave. What emotional state? He's just a dog, listen to yourself. And you didn't even tell us he had a liver problem. It's just a dog, can you calm the frick down? You're not allowed back in my home. Okay then, send the dog back to the shelter, that way the kid can go and see him now and then without it being such a hassle. Excuse me, this is his house now. Frick you, B-word. And she hung up. So during this time, my dad was in palliative care at home for the last stage of a lung terminal illness. The house was to be kept quiet to keep my dad comfortable. Scotty would always stand guard outside my dad's room. The doorbell starts ringing frantically and I go to open the door. In barges the kid and the entitled mum, her spewing some rant about how it's her right to meet the dog, and pushing the kid to go pet it. Scotty was right outside my dad's room. He had grown very protective of my dad. Now this dog has never barked, he has whimpered at the most. He sees the kid and mum charging towards my dad's room and barks so loud that they're taken aback. I almost cried out of pride for the boy. He knew who family was, finally. He growled a little and settled back down in front of my dad's room. Not even a tail wag their way. They left and never returned. As of 2019, they've never gone to Australia. Pretty sure his liver ailments, which he passed away from a couple of years later, made them think of him as too much of a liability. Some people shouldn't be allowed to own pets. Also, I'm not sure about the ethics involved in letting a former owner visit the dog, but I have read that it can cause trauma and hinder the dog's adjustments in a new home. Yeah, so the narrator has to admit bias here. I already knew that I was going to hate the family in question in the story for just abandoning a dog based on the title alone. Luckily, I think they lived up to my hate hype fully, so I felt justified. Seems like he was just too inconvenient for them to care for the dog that they'd purchased and adjusted to living with them. So they were already pretty darn bad, and then it got worse. They're unwilling to care for the dog because of its issues, but are then going to keep getting the positive elements of pet ownership without the negative. Visiting him in his new home and getting the pets and cuddles before leaving it in a depressed slump, and not even really coming to terms with how much harder they're making its life. Although, let's be honest, it kinda seemed like they thought the world revolved around them. Thinking they had some sort of legal right to barge into someone else's house just for a few selfies and belly rubs before they kickstart the vicious cycle again. Turfing the dog off on someone else so they don't have to pay its bills and expecting to be able to see it anyway. Such garbage people. Thank goodness that Scotty finally realized which family he valued more and got them the heck out of there. Otherwise, this could have stretched on a much longer time. Sing, angel of money. Music. Sit, dear listeners, and let me tell you the story of my mother. She may not be the most monstrous of mothers, but she's still a great big pile of, I am your mother and I'm entitled to your existence. Anyways, my mother had a dream. She used to sing, but one tragic, fateful day, she had a throat ache and, quote, destroyed her voice after taking too many, quote, lozenges. Or so she said. The moment she heard me sing, seeing how much I enjoyed it, there were stars in her eyes. Or maybe dollar signs, I can't really be sure, I was about 7. All of a sudden, she cared about me and my future. I guess if she couldn't be a famous singer, she could force me to do it. I was told that my dream was to be a singer. I was told and forced to put everything I had into it. Strenuous, individual classical training, competitions, constant practice. Her favorite was to turn our, at the time, state-of-the-art sound system all the way up and force me to sing over it. She was always nasty and uncaring towards me unless it was 1, in front of other people to make her seem like a good person, or 2, related to singing. I want to say that that's the worst, that's the entitlement. My mum thought that because she had birthed me, she had the right to insist that I follow her dream. But that doesn't even come close to it. Now, I hate to honk my own horn, but I am actually a good singer. I always placed into the top 3, but one year I got first. I nearly cried. Not only was I going to go home with $100, which is a lot for a 10-year-old, and a trophy, but also my mum wasn't going to spend the several-hour car trip back home screaming at me for not having won. I was so very happy. I think I would have rathered the screaming though, as the 10-year-old me excitedly thought of what kinds of nice things she could get herself after working so hard. My mother said, "Hey honey, I know you just got it, but I need your money for diapers and gas to get home. I'll pay you back." And my heart sunk. I knew that if I argued, I'd be whacked for talking back, and my little brother meant and always will mean the world to me, so I reluctantly gave her the money. Diapers for my brothers were important. They were worth it. But even that was a lie. My mother is a liar, and she's selfish, like most entitled mothers. Did she ever pay me back? No. But even worse, did she go and buy diapers and food for us like she'd said she needed? Double nope. She went and got her nails done with my money, and when I confronted her about it, she said that she couldn't handle having short nails and that she deserved nice things. Which, your children are literally starving. But that's a story for another time. Eventually, I wound up taking things into my own hands and simply left. Then I worked with my father to get custody of my younger brother instead. Aha, we have the double jeopardy of a monster who lives her dreams through her children, as well as just being the regular mean and awful person who shouldn't have kids. Look, if your kid is on board for the competitions and things, then take them to it, but screaming at them for not winning every time? I mean, do I even need to vocalize how freaking awful that makes you? Also, you aren't exactly enforcing a strong desire to win in your kids if they don't see any kind of benefit in their prize money. Like honestly, even just getting food sounds like it might have been something. You're teaching your kids that things basically suck whether they win or lose. So why bother? I'm beyond happy that the author worked alongside her dad to make sure that this absolute garbage pile of a parent wasn't the primary caregiver in their lives anymore. Although honestly, I wouldn't be too optimistic that she wouldn't just have more kids and try to exploit them instead in the future as well. Someone who'll just continue to make everyone's lives worse just by dint of being around. Hopefully the author found a more supportive and enjoyable outlet for their talent, and only if they wanted to continue with it. Honestly, after this story, I wouldn't blame them for never wanting to sing again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories.
You should let your elders go in front, you disrespectful teen.
Yep, so the title pretty much summed up what happened. It happened like an hour ago, and it amuses me still. Also, I told a friend who said I should write in with it. So I was getting a slice of pizza from some pretzel shop. I was the second in line. A lady in front of me was giving her order. An elderly lady, let's just say entitled granny, joins in with her grandkid. The wind was a bit strong, so naturally when she took out some money, it blew out of her hand. She told the kid to gather it. Of course, because she couldn't bend, she was 70 easily. It's understandable that she sent the kid who was 8 to 9 years old tops. Now this kid went under the lady in front and she screamed when the kid got up and hit her lady parts and then the bag when she moved away. Granny said nothing but, "Just bring the money back here." The lady looked mad and so did the cashier. That's when I knew this entire social encounter was going to be a barrel of fun. Now when my turn comes, I see Granny leaning in before me, so I tap her on the shoulder and tell her, "Mom, I was here before you. Please respect the line."
I wasn't doing anything. You annoying teens think you deserve everything.
That showed that she actually wanted to take my spot. Now, I wouldn't have minded if she'd asked. I always give them a place in line if I'm not in a hurry or if they have fewer items than me. But when they do stuff like this, I get angry. She continued to complain, saying, "Come on, it's your turn," and, teens these days are so rude. Can't let an elder in front, and, "I was here before." All of this while the lady was getting her change, so I couldn't order anything even 15 seconds after the lady let the cashier change something at the cash register, so I still couldn't order. Old Bat started yelling loudly at me to order already. I straightened up. I'm 180 centimeters, which is about 6 foot, and quite chubby and muscular at 75 kilos. I put on my meanest face. I look a bit like a lion. I'm not pretty. I'm straight up ugly and scary at times, since I had huge dark circles under my eyes and I've always had them. I've been told I look like I belong in The Godfather. This woman looked at me and complained, but less so, saying, "Stupid teen," and she used the masculine term, which is how Romanian works. Our verbs are different for masculine and feminine teens. She said this even though I'm a large-chested girl and my jacket was open, but okay lady, you do you. Even the cashier had that face that said, "Shut the frick up you fossil or I'll spit in your food." After I got my slice, she shouted, "Enjoy your crap food, you dumb and rude teen." I hope that the cashier dropped her pretzel. I also bet she told her kid that I was in the wrong. That poor, poor kid. Also, I just wanted to punch the crap out of her and honestly, hoped she'd try to hit me. I can easily jump away like a gazelle, plus I had sports gear on. Good shoes to jump and land on and long as frick legs. She would have made a fool out of herself while I would have had a good chuckle. I'd never punch her, even if it was the thing she wanted most. I'm not violent, but gosh, I just love seeing them mess up by themselves. Thanks guys, and have a good day. Well, this sounds like a venomous harridan indeed, doesn't it? I think when she deliberately started trying to make insults about your appearance is when you have to start another really slow order with the cashier. And really and ah over each menu item and ask what they contain, whether they're gluten-free, what gluten is, other foods that might contain gluten. Just really milk that interaction until the nasty bat is just 10 times more angry than before. Also, it's a very flexible pretzel shop that sells pizzas as well, so that menu is potentially enormous. But good on you, you tall, muscular Amazon of a woman. Honestly, most elderly people I know are far more polite than this, and while they might sometimes get a bit nonplussed when ordering food, you can't say that many of them try to just straight up cut in front at the line and demand it as their right by dint of sheer age. I wonder if that cashier did anything dodgy to Karen Sr.'s food. I'm not saying I'd encourage that behavior, but I wouldn't be unhappy to learn about it. Entitled neighbor took my mother to court to get primary custody of my mother's dog. When my mother and her dog moved next door to this entitled neighbor, they fell in love with my mum's dog Max. For about 2 years, the neighbor would come and get Max for visits, and would watch Max if my mother went out of town just so they could play with him. The neighbor moved across town and would still call to ask for Max visits. My mother started letting the dog go less and less, but would say yes now and again because of their pleading. Just before one of the arranged visits, Max got into a fight with another dog. Max seemed to be okay, and when the neighbor came, my mother said she was worried about letting him go because of the dog fight. The neighbor promised she'd look after Max and make sure he was okay. The next day, she called my mother and told her that she took Max to the vet because he had a wound on his neck. The neighbor also told my mum that she was keeping Max because my mother neglected the dog. My mum was devastated. My mother called the police and they couldn't help because she had agreed to allow the dog to go with a neighbor. My mother had to file a civil complaint and it took 2 months to go to court. The neighbor told the judge that she and my mother had always shared custody of the dog and that the neighbor was the most fit dog parent, so the entitled neighbor should have the dog. It was sadly very funny to watch. She brought a photo album into court to convince the judge that Max was part of her family. The judge explained that Max was my mother's possession and that the neighbor was to return him immediately. She also said that the neighbor was responsible for the vet bill and no, my mother didn't have to give the neighbor visitation. Oh, lots of stories with wonderful doggos and terrible owners in these stories, or at least in this case, a terrible presumptive owner. I don't understand how she thought this would fly in spite of the photo album that she'd cobbled together. I mean, the original owner would almost certainly have the adoption papers and vet bills amongst other things.
And she knew where that neck wound came from. It came from the dog fight that happens when you take your dogs out for walks in public areas. She knew the context of this one and had had it explained to her. Garbage woman. Am I the jerk for embarrassing my father-in-law after I repeatedly asked him to explain his joke to me? I, 27, used to be an escort, read working girl, from 18 until I was 23. I'm not proud of it, but I also don't give a frick because I did what I did to keep studying and have a roof over my head. That's how I met my new fiancé, who's 37, though he was never my client. We began to date when I was 25, and 3 or 4 months after that, his brother-in-law, quote, exposed me. I have no idea how he found out, because apparently there's no way my fiancé knew, and thus we had to come clean in front of his whole family. Yep, I did that, and yes, he knows. Yes, he doesn't care. It was 2 years ago at the time, and we got over it. After that, there was a span of 3 to 4 months in which my mother-in-law and some of my fiancé's aunts and cousins policed their husbands while I was around. It was really weird, to be honest, because these guys were like 40 to 60 years old, and I wasn't that desperate. So my fiancé shut their bullcrap down hard, and even when his family still gave me the side-eye from time to time, we thought it was behind us. He proposed last year, and 5 months ago we found out that I was pregnant. We were really happy about it, and we told his family as soon as we knew. His sisters and young brother were pretty happy for us, but his mum took me aside and begged me to be honest with her and asked if this was really my fiancé's child. I was taken aback but just rolled my eyes and said yes. She gave me some crappy speech about how she only wanted to make sure and that she was happy to be a grandmother. Well, last weekend we were at his parents with his family and some of his friends, and we were talking about the name. How he might look. Small talk, we'll love him regardless, but there's always some, oh, I hope he gets your nose. I like your eyes, I hope he gets them, kind of comments. And my father-in-law said that he and his children have a birthmark in the inner thigh, and that even his grandchildren, one of my sister-in-law's kids, get them, so our baby might too. And then he said, but how can we know from whom he got it? It may as well be from me, my boy, or my brothers. And he and his brothers began to laugh. My fiancé got mad, and before he could say anything, I said, I don't get it. And my father-in-law said, yeah, because it runs in the family. And I said, I don't get it. Why would he get it from you? And he began to get nervous and said, because, it's just a joke, all right? And I said, but I don't get it, and you all laughed. Explain. It got to the point that some of his friends said, hey, it's not funny. So he excused himself and left. Later, my fiancé's brother-in-law came to me and said that I was wrong for embarrassing him like that in his own house, and that I knew what the joke was about, and because of my past, I shouldn't be surprised. Now they're all demanding that I apologize to my father-in-law. Did I take it too far? No, madam, you are not the jerk here. It sounds like the in-laws are just a bunch of suspicious, crappy, close-minded people who don't understand that this kind of thing doesn't have to define you as a person for your whole life afterwards. And if you're going to make crappy jokes like that, you've got to be prepared for the other person to retaliate. You don't get to make fun of someone like that and imply that they've cheated on their partner, and then act completely surprised when they come after you for your sick burn. The in-laws need to get over themselves.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.